At 3:30 in the morning, my phone rang like a death knell in the silence of the guest house, and on the other end, my daughter-in-law Tiffany spoke 7 words that she thought would destroy me, but instead she just signed her own prison sentence. "Your son drowned in Hawaii, you get nothing." She thought she was talking to a grieving old man, a 72-year-old retired laborer she could easily manipulate. She forgot that before I was a grandfather, I was a union representative on the toughest docks in Detroit, and I know exactly what a lie smells like. She told me my son died drunk. She told me she burned his body immediately. She told me to pack my bags. I did not cry. I did not scream. I just smiled in the dark because Tiffany made 3 fatal mistakes in a 30-second phone call, and she had no idea that the war had just begun. Before I tell you how I took down a woman who thought she was smarter than the law, let me know where you are watching from in the comments below. Hit like and subscribe if you have ever had to stand silent while someone lied to your face knowing that the truth was your secret weapon. My name is Augustus King, but everyone on the docks used to call me Gus. I am 72 years old and my hands are rough like sandpaper from 40 years of handling steel and shipping containers. I built a life for my family out of sweat and grit so that my son Marcus would never have to touch a wrench unless he wanted to. Marcus was my pride. He was the CEO of a logistics company, a man who wore suits that cost more than my first car, but he never lost his heart. He let me live in the guest house on his estate, not because I was poor, but because after my wife Ruby passed away 5 years ago, he did not want me to be alone. But there was a snake in our paradise, and her name was Tiffany. Tiffany was 32 years old, a former model with eyes as cold as a winter lake, and a hunger for money that no amount of shopping could satisfy. She looked at me like I was a stain on her expensive carpet. She tolerated me only because Marcus insisted. But last night, tolerance turned into total war. The red numbers on my digital clock read 3:30 a.m. The rain was hammering against the roof of the guest house, a rhythm I usually found comforting, but tonight, the vibration of my phone on the nightstand made my stomach turn. No good news comes at that hour. I picked it up. The caller ID said Tiffany. My heart hammered against my ribs. Marcus and Tiffany were supposed to be on a second honeymoon in Maui, a trip Marcus had planned to fix their rocky marriage. I slid the answer button and brought the phone to my ear. "Gus, are you there?" Her voice was breathless. Not the breathlessness of panic or grief, but the rushed tempo of someone reciting a script they had memorized. "Tiffany, what is wrong?" I sat up in bed, switching on the lamp. The light was harsh against my old eyes. "It is Marcus." There was a pause that felt theatrical. "He is dead, Gus. He drowned last night." The world stopped spinning. For a second I felt the air leave my lungs. My boy, my only son, the baby I had held in my arms when he was small enough to fit in a shoebox. Dead. But then Tiffany kept talking, and the sorrow in my chest was instantly replaced by a cold, sharp suspicion. "He was drinking Gus," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "He drank way too much whiskey at the hotel bar. He got belligerent. He wanted to go for a swim in the ocean at midnight. I tried to stop him, but you know how he gets when he drinks. He went out past the break and got a cramp. By the time the lifeguards got to him, it was too late." I sat there on the edge of my bed, my hand gripping the phone so tight the plastic creaked. I looked at the framed photo on my dresser. It was a picture of Marcus from his college days standing on a podium wearing a gold medal. 1,500 meters freestyle. My son was not just a swimmer. He was a fish. He could hold his breath for 3 minutes. He could swim the English Channel if he wanted to. But that was not the detail that made my blood run cold. It was the whiskey. Tiffany continued, not letting me speak. "It was so traumatic, Gus. I could not bear to see him like that. Bloated and pale. So I made the executive decision. I had him cremated this morning here in Maui. It is what he would have wanted. I am bringing his ashes home in a few days, cremated, in less than 24 hours. Without an autopsy, without calling his father to identify the body, without a police investigation into a drowning accident. Then came the dagger, the reason for this call. And Gus, I have to be honest with you. Before we left, Marcus updated his will. He was unhappy with how much money he was spending on your medical bills and this property. He left everything to me, the company, the house, the accounts, everything. The lawyer will contact you, but since I am the sole owner of the estate now, I need privacy to grieve. You have 3 days to vacate the guest house. I will give you $5,000 for a motel, but you need to be gone by the time I get back." She stopped talking. waiting for me to break. She expected the old Gus to beg. She expected me to cry and plead and ask where I would go. She expected a senile old man who would crumble under the weight of tragedy. But she did not know about the EpiPen. She did not know that Marcus had a severe genetic allergy to ethanol. Alcohol was poison to him. One shot of whiskey would not make him drunk, it would close his throat and send him into anaphylactic shock within minutes. Marcus never drank. Not at his wedding, not at his graduation, not ever. He carried an EpiPen everywhere he went just in case of cross-contamination in food. If he was drinking whiskey as she claimed, he would have been dead on the floor of the bar long before he could ever walk to the ocean, let alone swim. And the swimming. A state champion swimmer drowning in calm resort waters because of a cramp. It was insulting. It was a lie so lazy that it proved she had no respect for my intelligence. And the cremation. No authorities in Hawaii would allow a body to be cremated that fast, especially in an accidental drowning case without a rigorous coroner report. She was lying about the body, which meant she was hiding something on the body. My silence stretched out. I could hear her breathing on the other end, impatient, waiting for my reaction. "Gus, did you hear me?" She snapped, her voice losing its fake tremble. "You have 3 days. Do not make this difficult." I looked at the rain hitting the window. I felt a strange calm settle over me. It was the same calm I used to feel before a strike negotiation when I knew the other side was bluffing. She had killed my son, or at least she thought she had, and now she was trying to bury the evidence and bury me along with it. She wanted a reaction. So I gave her one. "Okay," I said. My voice was steady, gravelly, and low. "Excuse me." She sounded confused. I said, "Okay, Tiffany, I understand. It is your house. I will be gone in 3 days. I could practically hear her smiling through the phone. She thought she had won. She thought the checkmate was hers. Good. She said, her tone suddenly crisp and businesslike. "I knew you would be reasonable. Do not touch anything in the main house. The alarm codes have already been changed. Goodbye, Gus." The line went dead. I put the phone down on the nightstand. I did not turn off the light. I stood up and walked over to the photo of Marcus. I touched the glass. "I promise you, son." I whispered to the empty room. "She will not spend a dime. Not one single dime." I walked to the closet and pulled out my old leather suitcase. The one I used to take to union conferences in the 80s. It was battered and scuffed, just like me. I started packing my clothes, not because I was obeying her orders, but because I needed to be mobile. I was not leaving to hide. I was leaving to hunt. She said Marcus was drunk. Lie number 1. She said he drowned. Lie number 2. She said he was cremated. Lie number 3. And the biggest lie of all was that I get nothing. I sat back down on the bed and opened the drawer where I kept my personal files. I pulled out a document that Tiffany did not know existed. It was the original incorporation papers for Red Rock Holdings, the shell company that owned 51% of Marcus's logistics firm. My name was right there at the bottom. Augustus King, chairman. Marcus was a good son. He knew his wife was greedy. He knew she had been spending too much. He had protected me, and in doing so, he had given me the sword I needed to cut her head off. But first, I needed proof. I needed to know what really happened in that hotel room in Maui. I needed to know if my son was truly dead, or if this was something even more twisted. I looked at the clock again. 3:45 a.m. I picked up the phone again. I did not call a lawyer. Not yet. I dialed a number I had not called in 10 years. A number with an 808 area code. Hawaii. It rang 4 times before a groggy voice answered. "Lieutenant Kalani." The voice grunted. "Kalani, it is Gus King. From the docks. I am cashing in that favor you owe me." There was a pause, and then the voice on the other end sharpened, instantly awake. "Gus, it has been a decade. What do you need?" "I need you to check the morgue in Maui," I said, my eyes fixed on the rain. "My daughter-in-law says my son is ashes in a jar. I have a feeling he is lying on a slab of ice waiting for someone to tell his story. And Kalani, I need you to do it quietly." I hung up the phone. A small, cold smile touched my lips. It was not a happy smile. It was the baring of teeth. Tiffany wanted a war. She wanted to erase the King family. She was about to learn that you do not start a fight with a man who has nothing left to lose but time. I closed my suitcase. The game was on. 2 days later, the black limousine rolled up the driveway of the estate like a hearse carrying the devil himself. I stood by the window of the guest house watching them arrive. The rain had stopped, leaving behind a humid, oppressive gray sky that made the air feel heavy in my lungs. Tiffany stepped out of the car first, wearing a black dress that cost more than my pension for a year. She did not look like a grieving widow. She looked like the star of a movie making her grand entrance. She was holding a ceramic urn against her chest, posing for the few photographers she had conveniently tipped off to be waiting at the gate. But she was not alone. From the other side of the car stepped a man I recognized instantly. Brett. He was her personal trainer, a man with muscles that looked inflated with helium and a brain to match. He was wearing a suit that was too tight across the shoulders, clearly bought for the occasion. He walked around the car and put his arm around Tiffany, pulling her close in a gesture that was supposed to look comforting, but looked entirely too possessive for a friend. They walked toward the main house, their hips bumping together. It was a performance, a sick, twisted play, and they were the lead actors. I walked out of the guest house. I had to see it. I had to see the container that supposedly held the remains of my son. The garden behind the main house had been transformed. White lilies were everywhere. The smell was suffocating. Tiffany had set up a small altar near the fountain Marcus had built with his own hands. There were about 50 people there. I scanned the crowd. None of them were Marcus's friends from the swimming team. None of them were his longtime employees from the logistics company. They were all Tiffany's crowd, models, socialites, people who drank champagne at funerals and gossiped about the inheritance before the body was even cold. I moved through the crowd like a ghost. People glanced at me and looked away. I was the old man in the cheap suit, the stain on the scenery. I did not care. My eyes were locked on the urn sitting on the table draped in white silk. I approached the table. My hands were trembling slightly, not from age, but from the rage boiling in my blood. I reached out. I wanted to touch the cold ceramic. I needed to feel the weight of it. If that was my son in there, I needed to say goodbye. Stop. The voice was sharp like a whip crack. Tiffany appeared beside me out of nowhere. Her hand shot out and grabbed my wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. Her fingernails dug into my old skin. "Do not touch it, Gus," she hissed. Her voice was low so the guests would not hear, but her eyes were full of venom. I looked at her. I looked at the hand gripping my wrist. "Let go of me, Tiffany," I said quietly. "That is my son." She sneered. Her face twisted into a mask of disgust. "You are filthy. Look at you. You smell like old engine oil and mothballs. Do not dirty his final resting place with your rough hands. Go stand in the back where you belong." She shoved my hand away and dusted off the imaginary dirt from the tablecloth. Brett stepped up behind her, crossing his arms over his chest. He stared down at me, trying to look intimidating. He was a foot taller than me, but I had stared down union breakers with baseball bats in the 80s. This steroid-pumped boy did not scare me. I looked at Brett, then I looked at Tiffany. I slowly wiped my hand on my jacket. "I will stand in the back," I said. "But remember this, Tiffany. Dirt washes off. Sins do not." I turned and walked away. I retreated to the shadow of the large oak tree at the edge of the property. My heart was pounding, but my mind was clear. She would not let me touch the urn because she was afraid. She was afraid I would notice the weight. A human body reduces to about 5 pounds of ash. Whatever was in that jar was either too heavy or too light. She was hiding the evidence in plain sight. I pulled out my phone and turned my back to the ceremony. I dialed Kalani again. He picked up on the first ring. "Talk to me," I said. "Gus." I checked the logs. Kalani's voice was serious. There was no cremation at the main facility in Maui on Tuesday, or Wednesday. I called the 2 smaller private ones on the island. Nothing. No Marcus King. My grip on the phone tightened. "So the urn is a prop." "It looks that way, Gus," Kalani continued. "And there is something else. The Jane Doe body I told you about found near the rocks. The coroner just finished the preliminary scan. Male, 40s, African American, athletic build. No ID, but matches the description you gave me. But Gus, the face is in bad shape. The rocks and the fish did a lot of damage. You are going to have to fly out here. We need dental records or a DNA match to be 100% sure." I closed my eyes. The pain was a physical blow. Hearing it confirmed was different than suspecting it. My boy was lying on a cold metal table in a morgue while this woman was parading a jar of fireplace ash around his garden. "Keep him on ice, Kalani," I whispered. "Do not release any info to the press. As far as the world knows, he is in that jar. I need her to feel safe. I will hold it for 48 hours, Gus. That is the best I can do." I hung up. I turned back to the funeral just as the music stopped. Tiffany was tapping a microphone. The feedback squealed, making everyone wince. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice breaking perfectly on cue. She dabbed her eyes with a lace handkerchief that was completely dry. "Losing Marcus is the hardest thing I have ever had to endure. He was my soulmate, my rock." She looked over at Brett and gave him a sad little smile. Brett nodded solemnly. But Marcus was also a visionary. She continued, her voice gaining strength. He cared about the world. He cared about helping others. And in his final days, he made a decision that I intend to honor. I narrowed my eyes. Here it comes. The pivot. Marcus realized that his logistics company was taking too much time away from what really mattered. Family, love, charity. Tiffany took a deep breath. So before he passed, he instructed me to sell King Logistics. A ripple of murmurs went through the crowd. King Logistics was one of the biggest freight movers in the state. It was worth millions. It employed hundreds of people. It was the empire I had built the foundation for, and Marcus had raised to the sky. "I am already in talks with a buyer," Tiffany announced, beaming through her fake tears. "And the proceeds of the sale will not go to waste. We are launching the Marcus King Foundation, a charity dedicated to ocean safety awareness." The irony made me want to vomit, and because I am so overwhelmed with grief. She reached out and took Brett's hand. "I have asked Marcus's dearest friend Brett to step in as the director of the foundation. He will manage the assets and ensure Marcus's legacy lives on." The crowd applauded. They clapped for the theft of a legacy. They clapped for the man who was sleeping with the widow. They clapped for the destruction of my son's life work. Brett stepped forward, puffing out his chest. He looked like a wolf who had just been handed the keys to the sheep pen. I watched them, the way Brett's thumb caressed the back of Tiffany's hand, the way they looked at each other with greedy triumph. They thought they had pulled off the perfect crime: dispose of the husband, fake the cremation, sell the company, funnel the money into a foundation controlled by the lover. It was a classic play: simple, brutal, effective. Except for one thing, they did not know that King Logistics was not an asset Marcus could just sell. They did not read the fine print of the corporate charter. They did not know about Red Rock Holdings. And they definitely did not know that the chairman of the board was standing 20 feet away, leaning against an oak tree, wearing a cheap suit and a very dangerous smile. I watched Tiffany hug a guest accepting condolences. She looked over the woman's shoulder and her eyes met mine. She smirked, a tiny, arrogant twitch of her lips. She thought I was defeated. She thought I was just witnessing her victory lap. "Enjoy it, Tiffany," I thought. "Enjoy the champagne. Enjoy the applause. Because you just admitted to fraud in front of 50 witnesses. You just announced you are selling something you do not own." I put my phone back in my pocket. I did not need to hear anymore. The funeral was fake. The ashes were fake. The tears were fake. But the war was real. I turned and walked back to the guest house. I had packing to do. And I had a plane to catch. But first I had one more stop to make. If they wanted to play dirty, I needed to make sure I had my own insurance. I walked into the garage attached to the guest house. My old toolbox was there. I opened the bottom drawer and lifted the false bottom. There, sitting in the dark, was a spare key to Marcus's private office in the main house. He gave it to me 5 years ago when he forgot his own. He never asked for it back. Tonight, while the widow and her lover celebrated their heist, I was going to pay a visit to the scene of the crime. Not Hawaii, but the office where the paperwork lived. The sun began to set, casting long shadows across the lawn. The laughter from the garden grew louder. They were toasting. "Let them drink," I muttered to myself. Tomorrow the hangover begins. The next morning arrived with a violent pounding on my door that shook the dust from the window frames. It was not the knock of a friend, and it was not the delivery of a package. It was the heavy, authoritative knock of the law. I was sitting at my small kitchen table, drinking black coffee and looking at the rain-slicked driveway. I checked my watch. 8 in the morning. Tiffany had said I had 3 days. Apparently her patience had expired along with her morality. I opened the door. 2 uniformed officers stood there. One was older, looking bored and tired. The other was young Deputy Miller, a kid I had known since he was in Little League. He looked at his boots, unable to meet my eyes. The older officer stepped forward, holding a folded piece of paper. "Augustus King?" he asked, although he clearly knew who I was. I nodded. "That is me. I am serving you with an immediate eviction notice and a temporary restraining order." He shoved the paper toward my chest. "You are to vacate the premises immediately. Mrs. King has filed a complaint stating that you made verbal threats against her life and the safety of her guests during the funeral yesterday. She claims she fears for her safety." I took the paper. The paper felt heavy, not because of the ink, but because of the lie printed on it. Verbal threats. I had told her that dirt washes off, but sins do not. To a woman like Tiffany, the truth was indeed a threat, but not a legal one. Miller finally looked up. His face was red. "I am sorry, Mr. King. We just have to follow the order. She called the station 5 times this morning screaming that you had a gun." "I do not have a gun, son," I said calmly. "I have a toolbox and a suitcase. You have 30 minutes to gather your personal effects," the older officer said, checking his watch. "We will wait in the cruiser. If you are not out by 8:30, we will have to escort you off the property in handcuffs. Do not go near the main house. Do not try to contact Mrs. King." They turned and walked back to their patrol car parked right behind my old Ford pickup. They were blocking me in. They were watching. I closed the door. My hands were steady, but my jaw was clenched so tight my teeth ached. She was escalating. Why? Why kick me out 2 days early? Why the restraining order? A person who holds all the cards does not panic. Tiffany was panicking. She was afraid of what I might find if I stayed here another hour. I walked to the bedroom and zipped up the suitcase I had already packed. But I was not leaving yet, not without checking the one place she did not want me to see. The guest house was attached to the main garage by a narrow utility corridor that ran behind the laundry room. It was designed for the housekeeper to move between buildings without going outside. I knew Tiffany had changed the alarm codes on the front and back doors. But Marcus had built this house, and he had told me once that the utility corridor was on a separate hardwired loop that often malfunctioned. He never fixed it because he liked having a back way into the garage to tinker with his cars late at night without waking the house. I peeked through the blinds. The officers were in the car arguing about something, likely breakfast. They were not looking at the side of the house. I moved. I slipped into the utility corridor. It was dark and smelled of dryer sheets and old dust. I reached the door that led into the main house's mudroom. I turned the handle. It was locked. I pulled a thin, flat tension bar from my pocket, a tool from my old days on the docks when keys went missing. I worked the lock. Click. I was inside. The main house was silent. It felt empty, not just of people, but of life. The air conditioning was set too low, making the place feel like a mausoleum. I moved quickly, avoiding the security cameras I knew were mounted in the main hallways. I stuck to the blind spots hugging the walls. My destination was Marcus's home office on the ground floor. I reached the double mahogany doors of the office. They were ajar. That was my first clue. Marcus never left these doors open. He respected privacy. I pushed the door open and slipped inside. The room was a wreck. Papers were scattered across the floor. Books were pulled from the shelves. It looked like a tornado had touched down specifically in this room. Tiffany had been searching for something. She had been searching frantically. My eyes went immediately to the large oil painting of the coastline that hung behind Marcus's desk. It was tilted at a sharp angle, hanging by a single wire. Behind it, the wall safe was exposed. I walked over to it. I did not need the combination. The door of the safe was hanging open. The metal around the lock was twisted and scarred. Someone had taken a heavy-duty industrial drill to the locking mechanism. They had not finessed it open. They had violated it. I looked inside. Empty. Not a single paper. Not a cash bundle. Not a deed. Nothing. I let out a breath I did not know I was holding. Tiffany had drilled the safe, expecting to find the life insurance policies, the deeds to the properties, and most importantly, the controlling documents for the logistics company. She found nothing. That explained the panic. That explained the eviction. She thought I had them, or she thought they were hidden somewhere else in the guest house and she wanted me gone so she could tear my place apart too. She was right about one thing. The documents were not there. But she was wrong about where they were. Marcus was smarter than that. He had moved the originals to a secure deposit box at the bank months ago, and the only person with the secondary access key was me. I turned to leave, satisfied that her greed had led her to a dead end, but then something caught my eye. The wastebasket next to the desk. It was overflowing. Tiffany had clearly been shredding documents she thought were irrelevant, but right on top, sitting precariously on a pile of shredded paper, was a small orange plastic cap. I knew that cap. I reached down and moved the paper aside. Underneath was a medical device, an epinephrine auto-injector, an EpiPen. I picked it up. It was brand new. The expiration date was 2 years from now. Through the clear viewing window on the side of the device, I could see the liquid inside. It was clear and colorless. Crucially, the device was full. The needle had never been deployed. The safety seal was broken, but the medication had not been administered. I held the plastic tube in my large hand, feeling a cold wave of realization wash over me. This was the smoking gun. This was the silent witness that screamed murder. Tiffany claimed Marcus was drinking heavily. She claimed he was drunk when he went swimming. Marcus had a severe life-threatening allergy to alcohol. It was not just an intolerance, it was anaphylaxis. His throat would close up within minutes of ingesting ethanol. If Marcus had voluntarily taken a drink of whiskey, he would have had this EpiPen in his hand. He would have been prepped to save his own life the moment he felt the reaction starting. Or, if he was drunk, as she claimed, he would have used it. But here it was, in the trash, in his office in California. He did not take it to Hawaii. Marcus never traveled without his medical kit. Never. The fact that his primary EpiPen was here in the trash meant one of two things. Either he forgot it, which was impossible for a man as meticulous as him, or he never intended to drink and therefore did not think he needed it for a casual trip. But there was a darker implication. If he drank whiskey in Hawaii without this pen, he would have died of anaphylactic shock in his hotel room long before he reached the water. His throat would have swollen shut. He would have suffocated on the carpet. But she said he drowned. If he drowned, he did not die from the allergy. If he did not die from the allergy, he did not drink the whiskey. And if he did not drink the whiskey, Tiffany was lying about the entire timeline of his death. She had planted the story of the drunken swim to cover up the real cause of death. She threw this EpiPen away because she thought it was just trash. She did not realize it was proof. It was proof that Marcus did not kill himself with alcohol. Someone else had killed him. I wrapped the EpiPen in a handkerchief and put it in my inside pocket next to my heart. This was it. This was the physical evidence I needed to show the coroner in Hawaii. I heard a car door slam outside. The cruiser. They were coming to check on me. I slipped out of the office and back into the utility corridor. I moved faster now, energized by the discovery. I made it back to the guest house just as Deputy Miller knocked on the door again. "Mr. King, time is up," Miller called out. I opened the door. I had my suitcase in one hand and my hat in the other. I looked calm. I looked resigned. "I am ready, Deputy," I said. Miller looked relieved. He nodded toward the gate. "We will follow you to the city limits, Mr. King, just to make sure there is no trouble." "There will be no trouble," I said, climbing into my truck. I started the engine. The old V8 roared to life. I backed out of the driveway, leaving the home my son built. I saw the curtain twitch in the main house window. Tiffany was watching. She was checking to make sure the rat was gone so she could scurry back to her cheese. She had no idea that the rat had just stolen the trap. I drove down the long, winding road, the police cruiser trailing me like a shadow. I did not turn toward the cheap motel Tiffany had suggested. I turned toward the airport. I had a plane to catch, and I had a little plastic tube that was going to bring the whole house of cards crashing down. As I merged onto the highway, I touched the pocket where the EpiPen lay. "Hang on, son," I whispered. "Daddy is coming, and I am bringing the storm with me." The motel was called the Blue Horizon, but the only blue thing about it was the mold in the bathroom grout and the flickering neon sign outside my window that buzzed like an angry hornet every 3 seconds. It was located on the edge of town near the airport, the kind of place where people went when they wanted to disappear or when they had nowhere left to fall. I paid for a week in cash. The clerk, a kid with piercings and tired eyes, did not even ask for my ID. He just slid a key across the scratched counter and went back to his magazine. Room 104. I walked into the room. It smelled of stale cigarette smoke and industrial cleaner, the scent of transient lives and bad decisions. I put my suitcase on the bed. The mattress sagged in the middle. It was a far cry from the guest house with its Egyptian cotton sheets in view of the manicured gardens. But strangely, I felt more at home here. This room reminded me of my early days in Detroit when I was organizing the union and sleeping in safe houses to avoid the company enforcers. I was not a guest here. I was an operative, and this was my command center. I did not unpack my clothes. Instead, I unpacked the war. I took the small round table from the corner and dragged it to the center of the room under the single dim light bulb. I took out a notepad and a pen. I took out the EpiPen wrapped in the handkerchief and placed it in the center of the table like a holy relic. Then I taped the eviction notice to the wall. Next to it, I taped the picture of Marcus winning his gold medal. I sat down in the rickety chair and stared at the wall. My mind was a storm, but my body was still. I needed to construct the timeline. I needed to find the cracks in her story before I could swing the hammer. Tuesday night, Marcus allegedly dies. Wednesday morning, Tiffany allegedly has him cremated. Wednesday night, she calls me. Friday, she holds the funeral. It was too fast. Bureaucracy does not move that fast, especially not when a healthy 40-year-old man dies violently in a foreign state. Autopsies take days. Toxicology reports take weeks. Releasing a body for cremation requires permits and signatures from coroners who are usually overworked and underpaid. Unless she bribed everyone on the island of Maui, which was impossible, or she was lying about the entire process. I sat there for hours as the sun went down and the neon light started painting blue stripes across my face. I watched the phone. I willed it to ring. I had sent Kalani on a mission, and the silence was eating me alive. Every minute I sat in this motel room was a minute Tiffany was solidifying her grip on my son's legacy. I could imagine her right now in the main house, probably drinking Marcus's vintage wine and laughing with that muscle-bound boyfriend of hers, thinking the old man was rotting away in some shelter. At 9 p.m., the phone finally rang. I picked it up before the second ring. Kalani. Gus. His voice was heavy. It sounded like he was speaking from the bottom of a well. Are you sitting down? I am standing, Kalani. Just tell me. Okay. Kalani took a breath. I spent the last 6 hours physically driving to every licensed crematorium on Maui. There are only 3 of them, Gus. I checked their digital logs. I checked their paper logs. I even intimidated the night shift manager at the main facility into letting me see the intake freezer. He paused. The silence on the line was deafening. Gus, no one named Marcus King has been cremated in the state of Hawaii this week. No one. I closed my eyes and let out a long, slow exhale. My suspicion was now a fact. But facts can be dangerous things. Are you sure? I asked. Could she have used a fake name? I checked for John Doe's too, Kalani said. We had 2 cremations of unidentified persons this week. One was a homeless man in his 80s found in a park. The other was a drowning victim, but it was a woman. Neither of them could be Marcus. Gus. I am telling you, there is no pile of ash that belongs to your son. I looked at the wall at the picture of the urn Tiffany had been clutching like a prize. If Marcus was not cremated, then what was in that jar? Wood ash from the fireplace, sand from the beach. Maybe she stopped at a pet cemetery. The realization hit me with the force of a physical blow, the disrespect, the absolute cold-blooded theater of it all. She had stood in front of 50 people and cried over a jar of dirt while my son was still out there somewhere alone. Where is he, Kalani? I asked, my voice cracking for the first time. If he is not in the jar, where is my boy? That brings me to the second part. Kalani hesitated. His voice dropped an octave, becoming more official, more policeman-like. We found a body, Gus, or rather the Coast Guard did, yesterday morning, washed up on the rocks at Black Rock Point. It is a dangerous spot known for strong currents. I gripped the phone tight. Describe him. Male, African American, approximately 6 feet 2 inches, athletic build. Kalani was reading from a report now. He was wearing swimming trunks. No jewelry, no wallet, no identification. It matched. It matched perfectly. But Gus, Kalani continued, and I could hear the pain in his voice. You need to prepare yourself. The body was in the water for at least 12 hours. The rocks, the marine life, the face is not recognizable. We cannot do a visual ID. We need dental records or DNA to be 100% sure. My stomach turned. My beautiful boy. The boy with the smile that could light up a room. Battered by the ocean. Alone on a slab of cold steel while his wife played the grieving widow halfway across the ocean. Is he at the county morgue? I asked. Yes. He is listed as John Doe number 47. They were getting ready to put him in long-term cold storage until someone claimed him. Gus, if this is him... It is him. I cut him off. I know it is him. Then you need to get here, Kalani said. I can stall the coroner for a day, maybe 2. I can tell them I have a lead on the ID, but you need to come and sign the papers. You need to bring his dental records if you have them. And Gus, if you come, bring that EpiPen you talked about. If we are going to prove this was not an accident, we need to build a chain of evidence that is ironclad. I will be there tomorrow, I said. One more thing, Gus. Kalani lowered his voice. If Tiffany claims she cremated him and has the ashes, that means she knowingly filed a false death report. Or worse, she did not file one at all. She is just telling people he is dead to move things along. Without a death certificate, she cannot legally claim the life insurance or the estate transfer. She knows that, I said, looking at the eviction notice. That is why she is moving so fast. She is trying to grab the cash and the portable assets before the banks ask for the certificate. She is trying to sell the company quickly, probably for cash under the table or a quick buyout. She needs everyone to believe he is gone so no one asks questions while she loots the vault. Exactly, Kalani said. She is banking on the fact that no one will check. She thinks the urn is enough to satisfy the social narrative while she fakes the legal narrative. It is a high-wire act, Gus. One slip and she falls. She just slipped, I said. She slipped when she called me. I hung up the phone. The room felt smaller now, but charged with energy. I looked at the urn in my mind. It was the ultimate prop. A lie made of ceramic. She was carrying it around like a shield, but it was actually a target. If the world found out that the urn was fake, her credibility would vanish instantly, but I could not just scream it from the rooftops. I needed proof. I needed to stand next to the real body of my son and prove that the thing in her hands was a fraud. I grabbed my suitcase. I threw the few clothes I had unpacked back inside. I did not fold them. I did not care about wrinkles. I put the EpiPen in my jacket pocket, zipped tight. I took the picture of Marcus off the wall and placed it gently in my wallet. I walked out of the room and went to the front desk. The kid with the piercings looked up surprised to see me. "Checking out already?" he asked. "You paid for the week. No refunds." "Keep the money," I said. "Consider it a donation to your education." I walked out into the humid night air. The rain had started again. I got into my truck and turned the key. The engine rumbled a sound that usually calmed me, but tonight it sounded like a growl. I drove to the airport. I bought a ticket on the red-eye to Honolulu with a connection to Maui. I paid with my credit card, knowing that Tiffany might see the charge eventually. Let her see it. Let her wonder why the old man is flying to Hawaii. By the time she figures it out, it will be too late. I sat at the gate watching the planes take off and land. I watched the families hugging the businessmen, rushing the tourists, laughing. They were all living in a world where things made sense. I was living in a nightmare. But as I looked at the dark runway, I realized something. Tiffany had made a critical tactical error. She assumed that by presenting the ashes, the story was over. She assumed that ashes meant closure. She did not understand that for a father there is no closure until there is truth. She had given me a fake ending. Now I was going to write the real one. I boarded the plane and took a window seat. As we lifted off, the lights of the city faded into the darkness below. Somewhere down there in that sprawling grid of lights was my son's house and the woman who killed him. "Sleep tight, Tiffany," I whispered against the cold glass. "Because when I come back, I am bringing the ghost of Marcus King with me, and he is going to be very loud." The flight to Maui was 6 hours of darkness, interrupted only by the rhythmic humming of the jet engines and the occasional ding of a seatbelt sign. While the other passengers around me slept with neck pillows and dreams of Mai Tais and sandy beaches, I stared out into the black void at 30,000 feet. I felt like a man traveling in a time machine, not to the future, but to a moment of absolute destruction. I was the only person on that plane wearing a heavy suit and carrying the weight of a murdered son in his chest. I did not eat the peanuts. I did not watch the movie. I just replayed the phone call from Tiffany over and over again in my head, dissecting every tone, every pause, every lie. When the wheels touched down on the runway, the humidity hit me the moment I stepped onto the jet bridge. It was the smell of flowers and jet fuel, a sickeningly sweet combination that I would forever associate with death. I did not go to the baggage claim. I had my carry-on and my grief. I walked straight to the pickup curb where a black, unmarked SUV was waiting. Leaning against the hood was Kalani. He looked older than the last time I saw him, his hair completely gray now, but he still had the build of a linebacker and eyes that missed nothing. We did not hug. Men like us do not hug when there is work to be done. He just gripped my hand, a handshake that felt like iron striking iron, and opened the passenger door. "Good to see you, Gus," he said. "I wish it was for a fishing trip." "Me too, Kalani," I said, climbing in. "Take me to him." The drive to the county morgue took us away from the resort strip, away from the paradise the tourists paid thousands of dollars to see. We drove into the industrial heart of the island, where the buildings were concrete and the fences were chain link. The silence in the car was heavy. Kalani knew better than to offer platitudes. He knew I was in combat mode. We pulled up to a low gray building tucked behind the hospital. The sign said Department of the Medical Examiner. Inside, the air was freezing cold, a sharp contrast to the tropical heat outside. It smelled of antiseptic and floor wax, the smell of places where people stop being people and start being evidence. Kalani led me through a set of double doors to a room lined with stainless steel drawers. A small Asian man in a white lab coat was waiting for us. He looked tired. "This is Dr. Chang," Kalani said. "He is the best forensic pathologist in the state. He came in on his day off for this, Doctor." Chang extended a gloved hand. "Mr. King, I am very sorry for your loss. I need to warn you before we proceed. The ocean is unforgiving. The condition of the body is consistent with impact against volcanic rock." "I understand, Doctor," I said. "Just show me." Chang nodded and walked to drawer number 47. He unlatched it with a metallic click that echoed in the silent room. He slid the tray out. A white sheet covered the form beneath. My knees felt weak for the first time in 20 years. That was my boy under there. That was the child I taught to ride a bike. That was the man who built an empire. And now he was just a shape under a sheet in a cold room 4,000 miles from home. Chang pulled the sheet back slowly, revealing only the upper torso and the right arm. I stopped breathing. The damage was severe, just as they had warned. The skin was discolored, bruised, and battered. But I did not need to see the face. I looked at the right shoulder. There, just below the collarbone, was a small jagged scar shaped like a crescent moon. It was from a bicycle accident when Marcus was 10 years old. He had fallen into a fence, and I had stitched the wound myself because we could not afford the emergency room copay back then. I reached out and touched the scar with my thumb. The skin was ice cold. "It is him," I whispered. "That is Marcus." I nodded to Dr. Chang, and he covered the body again. I turned away, feeling a tear, hot and angry, slide down my cheek. I wiped it away instantly. "Okay," I said, my voice sounding like gravel grinding together. "You have the ID. Now tell me how he died. And do not tell me he drowned." Dr. Chang looked at Kalani, then back at me. He walked over to a computer monitor on the wall and pulled up a series of X-rays and toxicology charts. "You are right, Mr. King," he said. "He did not drown, or at least not in the way the story suggests." Chang pointed to the image of the lungs. "In a typical drowning case, especially in rough ocean waters, we expect to see the lungs heavy with water foam in the airways and signs of violent struggle as the victim gasps for air. Marcus's lungs were surprisingly dry. There was some fluid, but not enough to cause death by itself. This suggests that when he went into the water, he was likely already unconscious, or his breathing was so shallow that he did not inhale deeply." He tapped a key and a bar graph appeared on the screen. The bars were red and spiked high. "This is the toxicology screen," Chang said. "We ran a full panel. There was 0 alcohol in his system, not a drop. Which confirms what you told Kalani about his allergy. If he had drunk whiskey, he would have had a massive histamine reaction. His throat looks normal. No swelling, no alcohol." I felt a surge of vindication. Tiffany lied. But Chang continued, his voice dropping lower. "We found something else. Something that should not be there." "We found high levels of ketamine in his blood," Ketamine, Kalani asked. "The horse tranquilizer. It is used in human medicine as an anesthetic," Chang explained. "But in this dosage, it would cause total dissociation, paralysis, and unconsciousness within minutes. It acts fast. If someone injected this into him, he would have been unable to move, unable to speak, and unable to swim. He would have been dead weight." I stared at the red bars on the screen. Ketamine. It was a coward's weapon. "So he was drugged," I said, my voice shaking with rage. "Yes," Chang said. The injection site is here. He pointed to a small puncture mark on the neck hidden by the hairline. It is hard to find if you are not looking for it. It looks like a bug bite. But the tissue analysis confirms it. He was injected with a massive dose of ketamine, then thrown into the water. The cause of death was technically asphyxiation because he could not keep his head up, but legally and medically, this is a homicide. The room went silent. The hum of the refrigerator unit seemed to get louder. Murder. It was not an accident. It was not a cramp. It was an execution. Tiffany and that boyfriend of hers had drugged my son, paralyzed him, and tossed him into the ocean like garbage. They watched him sink. They watched him die. I felt a darkness rise up inside me that scared me. It was not the anger of a father. It was the calculated cold fury of a man who knows exactly how to dismantle an enemy. Dr. Chang looked at me. I have to file this report with the local police, Mr. King. Once I do, it becomes a criminal investigation. We will have to contact the next of kin. That means Mrs. King. No, I said sharply. Kalani and Chang both looked at me. No, I repeated. You cannot file that report. Not yet. Gus, this is murder, Kalani said, stepping forward. We have to bring her in. If you file that report now, I said, turning to face them, the news will hit the wires in an hour. Tiffany will know. She is in California right now selling off Marcus's company. She has high-priced lawyers. If she finds out, we know she will lawyer up, she will destroy evidence, and she will hide the money. She will claim Brett did it without her knowledge. She will spin a story. She will get away with it. I walked closer to Kalani. I need time, Kalani. I need her to think she is safe. I need her to think the cremation lie worked. When a criminal feels safe, they get sloppy. They make mistakes. They spend money. They sign papers they should not sign. What are you asking me to do? Kalani asked, crossing his huge arms. I am asking you to delay the official filing, I said. Keep him as a John Doe for 48 more hours. Let Dr. Chang run more tests. Lose the paperwork on your desk for a day. Just give me enough time to get back to California and let her hang herself. Kalani looked at Chang. Chang looked at the floor, then nodded slightly. I can hold the official certification pending confirmatory DNA analysis, Chang said. That usually takes a week in a busy lab. I can legally justify the delay. Kalani sighed and rubbed his face. You are asking me to risk my badge, Gus. I am asking you to help me get justice for the boy you used to take fishing, I said. Real justice. Not a plea bargain. I want to destroy her, Kalani. I want to take everything she stole. And then I want to put her in a cell for the rest of her life. Kalani looked at me for a long moment. Then he nodded. 48 hours, Gus. That is all I can give you. After that, I have to log it. That is all I need, I said. I looked back at the drawer where Marcus lay. I placed my hand on the cold metal handle. I will be back for you, son, I whispered. And when I come back, I will bring her scalp. I walked out of the morgue and into the humid night. The rain had stopped. The sky was beginning to lighten with the first gray streaks of dawn. I felt different. The grief was still there, but it had hardened into something useful. It was fuel now. I turned to Kalani. Get me back to the airport. I need to be in California before she wakes up. You are going back to the lion's den, Kalani said, unlocking the car. No, I said, climbing in. I am the lion. She is just the gazelle that forgot to run. As the SUV pulled away, I took the EpiPen out of my pocket. It was the first piece of the puzzle. Now I had the second piece, the ketamine. The picture was complete. Tiffany King was celebrating right now. She was probably sleeping in my son's bed, dreaming of yachts and diamonds. She had no idea that a 72-year-old man was flying toward her at 500 miles an hour, carrying a secret that would turn her dream into a nightmare. I closed my eyes and let the motion of the car lull me. I did not sleep. I planned. I visualized the look on her face when the trap finally snapped shut. It was going to be beautiful. I flew back to California on a commercial flight surrounded by tourists wearing floral shirts and smelling of coconut sunscreen while I sat in my wrinkled suit smelling of morgue antiseptic and cold fury. I landed in Los Angeles at 2 in the afternoon and drove straight back to the Blue Horizon Motel. The maid had not touched my room. The eviction notice was still taped to the wall, and the empty space where Marcus's picture used to be stared back at me like an open wound. I sat on the edge of the sagging bed and waited. I knew she would come. Tiffany was the kind of person who needed to gloat. Victory was not real for her unless she could rub someone else's face in it. I did not have to wait long. At 4:30, a silver Porsche pulled into the motel parking lot looking like a spaceship that had landed in a junkyard. Tiffany stepped out. She was wearing huge sunglasses and a white silk scarf tied around her neck. She looked like she was on her way to a photo shoot, not a confrontation with her dead husband's father. She walked across the cracked asphalt, avoiding the puddles of oil, and knocked on my door with the tip of her car key. I opened the door. She did not come in. She stood in the doorway, wrinkling her nose at the smell of old cigarettes and mildew. She looked me up and down, her eyes lingering on my unshaven face and my weary posture. She smiled. It was the smile of a predator that had just finished a meal. "You look terrible, Gus," she said. "I have had a long flight, Tiffany," I said, leaning against the doorframe. She laughed, a short, sharp sound. "A flight? Where did you go, Gus? Did you go cry to your sister in Chicago? It does not matter. I just came by to give you this." She reached into her designer handbag and pulled out a thick, white envelope. She tossed it onto the bed behind me. It landed with a heavy thud. "What is that?" I asked, even though I knew exactly what it was. $5,000 cash, she said, adjusting her sunglasses. "Consider it a severance package, or a pity payment, whatever makes you feel better. I sold the company this morning, Gus. The papers are signed. The wire transfer is clearing as we speak. We got $12 million for it. A little under market value, but Brett and I wanted a quick sale so we can move on with our lives." She said it so casually. $12 million. My son's life work, my sweat and blood, sold for a quick payday so she could buy a new life with her lover. "You sold King Logistics," I asked, keeping my voice flat. "Without a board meeting." "I am the board," she snapped. "I am the sole heir. And now I am $12 million richer. So take that $5,000 and go back to Detroit or wherever it is you old people go to die. Do not call me. Do not come to the house. If I see you again, I will have you arrested for harassment." She turned to leave, her heels clicking on the concrete. Then she stopped and looked back over her shoulder. "Oh, and Gus, I threw out that old toolbox of yours. It was cluttering up my garage." She got into her Porsche and drove away, the engine roaring like a beast. I watched her go until the silver speck disappeared into the smog of the city. I closed the door and locked it. I walked over to the bed and picked up the envelope. I counted the money. 50 bills, $100 each, $5,000. It was blood money. It was an insult. It was the price she put on my dignity. But as I held the cash in my hand, I started to laugh. It started as a low rumble in my chest and grew into a loud barking laugh that made my ribs ache. She had just given me the weapon I needed to kill her. She thought she was buying my silence, but she was actually funding her own execution. I did not need the money. I had my pension. But there was a poetic justice in using her money to hire the man who would take everything she had. I showered and shaved. I put on a fresh shirt. I put the $5,000 in my pocket and the original incorporation documents of Red Rock Holdings in my briefcase. I drove downtown to a skyscraper that was all glass and steel, the kind of building that looked down on the rest of the city. I took the elevator to the 42nd floor. The doors opened into a lobby that smelled of expensive leather and fear. The sign on the wall said Goldberg and Associates in gold letters. Saul Goldberg was a legend in Los Angeles. They called him the Shark of the Pacific. He did not care about justice. He did not care about morality. He cared about winning, and he cost $1,000 an hour. I walked past the receptionist, who tried to stop me, and walked straight into his corner office. Goldberg was sitting behind a desk that was bigger than my car. He was a small man with sharp eyes and a suit that cost more than my house. He looked up, surprised, but not alarmed. "Mr. King, I presume," he said, looking at the appointment on his screen. "You are late, and you do not look like a man who can afford my retainer." I walked up to his desk and pulled the envelope out of my pocket. I dumped the $5,000 onto his polished mahogany desk. "Here is your retainer," I said. 5 hours of your time. That is all I need." Goldberg looked at the pile of cash, then up at me. He raised an eyebrow. "An old-school approach. I like cash. But what can you possibly have that requires my specific set of skills, Mr. King? This looks like a standard probate issue." "It is not probate," I said, sitting down. "It is corporate warfare, and it is murder." Goldberg leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "You have my attention. You have 4 hours and 59 minutes left." I opened my briefcase. I did not start with the murder. I did not start with the affair. I started with the paper. My daughter-in-law thinks she sold my son's company this morning, I said, sliding a document across the desk. She thinks she is the sole heir because she is his wife. She thinks King Logistics was a sole proprietorship owned by Marcus King. And was it not Goldberg asked, picking up the document? No, I said. Marcus King was the CEO. He ran the day-to-day operations. He was the face of the company. But 20 years ago when we started, I made sure we incorporated in Nevada under a different structure to protect us from liability on the docks. Goldberg's eyes scanned the paper. He stopped at the second page. His eyes narrowed. King Logistics is a wholly owned subsidiary of Red Rock Holdings, he read aloud. Correct, I said. And who owns Red Rock Holdings? Goldberg asked, looking up. I pointed to the signature at the bottom of the page. I do, I said. Goldberg looked at the signature, then back at me. A slow smile spread across his face. It was the smile of a shark that just smelled blood in the water. So Marcus King did not own the company, he just worked for it, Goldberg said. Which means his wife just sold an asset she does not own. She committed fraud, grand larceny, and the sale is void. It gets better, I said. Look at Clause 13. Goldberg flipped the page. He adjusted his glasses. He read in silence for a moment. Then he started to chuckle. The chuckle turned into a laugh. Clause 13, he read. In the event of the death or incapacitation of the appointed CEO, all executive powers and check-signing authority immediately revert to the chairman of Red Rock Holdings. Furthermore, any attempt by unauthorized parties to liquidate assets without the chairman's written consent will result in the immediate freezing of all associated accounts and personal liability for the unauthorized party. He looked up at me with genuine admiration. This is a poison pill, Mr. King, a nuclear option. Did she know about this? She thinks I am just a retired mechanic, I said. She never read the bylaws. She just saw the bank balance and got greedy. Goldberg stood up and walked to the window looking out over the city. So here is the situation, Mr. King, he said. She signed a contract to sell the company. The buyers likely transferred the money to an escrow account or directly to the company account. But since she is not the authorized signer, she cannot legally access that money. However, if she manages to move it offshore before we strike, we might never see it again. She cannot move it, I said, because you are going to freeze it, right now. Goldberg turned back to me. His eyes were gleaming. I can get an emergency injunction within the hour, he said. We can lock every account associated with King Logistics and Red Rock Holdings. We can also file a lien against her personal assets for attempted theft. Do it, I said. But that is not all. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the toxicology report from Hawaii. I slid it across the desk next to the money. This is the medical report for my son, I said. He did not drown. He was drugged with ketamine. She killed him to sell the company, but she sold a company she did not own. Goldberg looked at the report. His face lost its humor. He sat down slowly. This changes everything, he said quietly. This is not just a lawsuit anymore. This is a death sentence for her. If we play this right, we do not just get the money back. We send her to federal prison for life. That is the plan, I said. But I want to do it my way. I want her to think she won. I want her to spend the money. I want her to dig the hole so deep she can never climb out. Goldberg looked at the cash on his desk, then at the documents, then at me. Mr. King, he said, you are a scary man. I am a father, I said. And she killed my boy. Goldberg pressed a button on his intercom. Cancel my dinner reservations, he told his secretary, and get me a judge on the line. We have an emergency freeze order. He looked at me. We are going to let her feel rich for exactly 48 hours, Goldberg said. Let her write checks, let her buy cars, let her incriminate herself with every dollar she spends, and then on Monday morning when she walks into the bank to transfer the millions, the account will be reading 0, I finished. Goldberg grinned. Below 0, Mr. King. She will be liable for the fraud. She will owe millions. He held out his hand. It is a pleasure doing business with you, Gus. I shook his hand. The $5,000 she gave me was still sitting on the desk. Use that for the filing fees, I said, pointing to the cash. I want her to pay for her own destruction. I walked out of the office. The sun was setting, painting the sky red. I felt lighter. The trap was set. The legal bear trap was armed and hidden in the tall grass. Tiffany was walking right toward it, blind and drunk on greed. I got back into my truck and drove to a small diner near the motel. I ordered a burger and a coffee. I ate slowly. My phone buzzed. It was a notification from a real estate app I still had installed from when Marcus was house hunting years ago. New listing 1240 Oak Ridge Drive. Pending sale. It was my house, the main estate. She had listed the house too. She was selling everything. She was liquidating the entire King legacy. I took a sip of coffee. Go ahead, Tiffany. Sell the house. Sell the cars. Sell the furniture. You are just polishing the brass on the Titanic. I finished my meal and went back to the motel. I lay on the bed and stared at the ceiling. I could hear the sirens in the distance. They sounded like music. The wait was almost over. Tomorrow was Sunday. Monday was the day the world would end for Tiffany King, and I would be there in the front row watching the fire. Monday morning arrived with the kind of aggressive California sunshine that makes everything look sharper and more expensive. I sat in my rental car across the street from the Porsche dealership, sipping a coffee that had gone cold an hour ago. I was not there to buy a car. I was there to watch a masterclass in stupidity. Tiffany and Brett arrived at 10 a.m. sharp. They did not come in the silver Porsche she drove yesterday. They arrived in a ride-share service which told me they had already traded in the old car or crashed it. They walked into the dealership like they owned the pavement. Tiffany was wearing a white dress that looked like it belonged on a yacht in Monaco, and Brett was wearing sunglasses that cost more than my first house. I watched through the glass showroom walls. It was like watching a silent movie of greed. Tiffany pointed at a neon green convertible. She did not look under the hood. She did not ask about the mileage. She just pointed. I saw the salesman's eyes light up. He looked like a shark that had just spotted a seal falling off a boat. They spent an hour inside. When they came out, the neon green car was rolling out of the bay. They high-fived. Actually high-fived. My son was dead less than a week, his body lying on a slab of cold steel in Hawaii, and his wife was high-fiving her lover over a car that looked like a radioactive lime. I picked up my phone and called Goldberg. They just bought the car, I said. Good, Goldberg said. His voice was crisp. That means they used the credit line connected to the logistics company. We traced a $50,000 down payment clearing 10 minutes ago. She is digging the hole deeper, Gus. Every dollar she spends is another count of embezzlement. Let her enjoy the ride, I said, starting my engine. She is on her way to the bank now to close the sale of the company. I will meet you there. I pulled out into traffic, keeping a safe distance behind the green convertible. They were driving fast, weaving in and out of traffic. Brett was driving. His arm was hanging out the window. They looked invincible. They looked like the kings of the world. We arrived at the downtown branch of the First National Bank at 11. This was the big meeting. The buyers of King Logistics were waiting. The lawyers were waiting. The $12 million was sitting in digital limbo waiting for a signature. I parked in the garage and took the elevator up. Goldberg met me in the lobby. He looked calm. He was holding a leather folder. Are you ready to watch the fireworks, Mr. King? He asked. I have been ready for 5 years, I said. We did not go into the conference room. Not yet. The conference room had glass walls. It was designed to look transparent and modern. It was perfect for us. We stood in the waiting area pretending to look at brochures, but our eyes were fixed on the scene inside. Tiffany sat at the head of the table. She looked powerful. She had a stack of documents in front of her. Across from her were 3 men in gray suits, the buyers. They looked impatient. They wanted the deal done. I watched Tiffany pick up a gold pen. She laughed at something one of the lawyers said. She threw her head back, exposing her long neck. It was a performance. She was playing the role of the grieving widow forced to sell her husband's legacy to save herself. She signed the first document, then the second. Then she pushed the stack across the table. The lead buyer nodded and tapped something on his laptop. That was the signal to release the funds. Tiffany leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. She looked at Brett, who was sitting in the corner playing on his phone. She smiled. She was thinking about the $12 million. She was thinking about the villa she had put a deposit on. She was thinking about how easy it was to erase Marcus King from the earth. Then the mood in the room changed. The buyer frowned at his laptop. He tapped a few more keys. He looked confused. He whispered something to his lawyer. The lawyer looked at the screen and frowned too. I saw Tiffany sit up straighter. She asked a question. I could not hear her through the glass, but I could read her lips. What is the problem? The buyer turned the laptop screen toward her. He pointed at a red error message box. Tiffany stood up. She slammed her hands on the table. Her face turned red. She was yelling now. I saw the bank manager, a woman named Mrs. Higgins, enter the room. She looked flustered. She was holding a file. Goldberg nudged me. "Showtime," he whispered. We walked closer to the glass. We could hear them now. Tiffany's voice was shrill, penetrating the soundproof glass like a drill. "What do you mean declined?" she screamed. "The money is there. You said the buyers have the funds." "The funds are verified." Mrs. King, the bank manager, said, her voice shaking slightly. "The problem is not with the buyers. The problem is with the authorization." "What authorization?" Tiffany demanded. "I am the authorization. I am Marcus King's wife. I am his sole heir. I have the death certificate right here." Well, she had a fake affidavit, but she waved it like a flag. The bank manager took a step back. "Mrs. King, please lower your voice. The system has flagged this transaction because of the corporate structure of King Logistics." "I do not care about the structure," Tiffany yelled. "Just give me my money." "I cannot," the manager said firmly. "The system requires a second signature." Tiffany froze. "A second signature? What are you talking about? Marcus ran this company alone. He was the boss." Marcus King was the chief executive officer, the manager explained, looking at the file in her hands. "But King Logistics is a subsidiary. According to the bank charter filed 20 years ago, any liquidation of assets over $10,000 requires the wet ink signature of the chairman of the board." Tiffany looked like she had been slapped. "Chairman. There is no chairman. Marcus was the chairman." "No, ma'am," the manager said. "Marcus King was the CEO. The chairman position is held by the controlling entity, Red Rock Holdings." Tiffany stared at her. Her mouth opened and closed like a fish. "Red Rock Holdings. I have never heard of them." "Who are they?" "They are the majority shareholder," the manager said. "And without the signature of their representative, this sale is void. The assets are frozen." Tiffany looked around the room. The buyers were packing up their laptops. They looked disgusted. They did not want to be involved in a messy probate fight. "Wait," Tiffany pleaded, grabbing the buyer's arm. "Do not leave. It is just a clerical error. I will fix it. I will sign whatever you want." "Get your hands off me," the buyer said, shaking her off. "Call us when you actually own the company you are trying to sell." They walked out. Tiffany was left standing alone with the bank manager and Brett, who had finally looked up from his phone. "This is ridiculous," Tiffany shrieked. "Marcus is dead. I own everything. Who is this Red Rock Holdings? I want to speak to them. I want to fire them." "You cannot fire them, ma'am," the manager said. "They own 51% of the company. Technically, they can fire you." Tiffany grabbed a heavy crystal pitcher of water from the table and hurled it against the wall. It shattered, sending glass and water everywhere. "I want my money," she screamed. "It is my money." That was our cue. Goldberg opened the glass door and walked in. I followed him, staying a few steps back in the shadow of the doorway. "Good morning, Mrs. King," Goldberg said, his voice calm and smooth. "I believe there seems to be a misunderstanding regarding the ownership of your late husband's assets." Tiffany spun around. Her hair was messy, her eyes wild. "Who the hell are you?" "I am Saul Goldberg," the lawyer replied. "And I represent Red Rock Holdings." Tiffany's eyes narrowed. You represent the company." "Fine. Then tell this idiot bank manager to release the funds. Tell her I am the owner." "I am afraid I cannot do that," Goldberg said, smiling. "My client has given me strict instructions to halt this sale." "Your client," Tiffany spat. "Who is your client?" "Some silent partner Marcus hid from me." "Some secret investor." "Something like that," Goldberg said. Tiffany walked up to him, getting right in his face. She smelled of expensive perfume and nervous sweat. "Listen to me, you little lawyer. I do not care who your client is. Marcus is dead. That makes me the queen of this empire. You call your client and tell him that if he does not sign those papers, I will sue him into oblivion. I will burn this company to the ground before I let anyone else take a penny." Goldberg did not blink. He just looked past her shoulder to where I was standing. "I do not think you need to call him Mrs. King," Goldberg said. "He is right there." Tiffany turned around. She saw me. I was wearing my old gray suit, the one I wore to church. I was holding my hat in my hands. I looked at her with the same expression I used to have when I looked at a broken engine block, pity mixed with a desire to fix the problem. "Gus," she said. Her voice was flat. "What are you doing here? I told you to leave town." I walked into the room. The glass crunched under my shoes. "I did leave town, Tiffany," I said. "I went to Hawaii." Her face went pale. The color drained out of her cheeks so fast she looked like a ghost. "Hawaii," she whispered. "Yes," I said. "It is beautiful this time of year, but the morgue is a little cold." Brett stood up, knocking his chair over. "What is he talking about, Tiff?" "Shut up, Brett," Tiffany hissed. She looked back at me, trying to regain her composure. "You are senile, old man. I do not know what you think you are doing here, but this is a business meeting. Get out." "I am not here for the coffee, Tiffany," I said, walking to the head of the table where she had been sitting. I picked up the gold pen she had used. It was a nice pen. Marcus had given it to her for their anniversary. "I am here because you wanted to speak to the chairman," I said. Tiffany laughed, a nervous, high-pitched sound. You are the chairman. You are a retired mechanic, Gus. You fix cars. You do not run companies." "I fixed this company 20 years ago," I said. "I built it from a single truck, and when Marcus took over, I kept the controlling share, not because I did not trust him, but because I knew one day he might marry someone like you." I dropped the pen on the table. It made a loud clatter in the silent room. "I am Red Rock Holdings Tiffany, and I am denying the sale." Tiffany stared at me. Her brain was trying to process the information. The old man she had kicked out. The old man she had humiliated. He was the one holding the keys to the kingdom. "This is a lie," she stammered. "It is a forgery. Marcus would never—" "Marcus," I said, cutting her off. "And because you just tried to sell my property without my permission, Mr. Goldberg here has just filed a freezing injunction on all your accounts, including the one you used to buy that green car outside." Brett looked at Tiffany. "Tiff, what does that mean?" "It means you are walking home," I said. Tiffany's face twisted into a mask of pure hate. "You cannot do this. I am his wife. I have rights. You have the right to remain silent," I said quietly. "That is about the only right you have left." She lunged at me. Her hands were clawed, reaching for my face. Brett grabbed her, holding her back. "I will kill you," she screamed. "I will kill you, you old bastard. You already tried to kill the King family," I said, standing my ground. "But you missed one." The bank manager signaled the security guards. 2 large men in uniform stepped into the room. "Mrs. King, please escort yourself out," the manager said. "Or we will call the police." Tiffany straightened her dress. She pulled away from Brett. She looked at me with eyes that promised murder. "This is not over, Gus," she said. "You think you have won because of some paperwork, but you have no idea who you are dealing with. I will drag you through court until you are dead." I looked at her. I looked at the fear hiding behind the anger. "Save your money for the lawyers, Tiffany," I said. "You are going to need them." She turned and marched out of the room, her heels striking the floor like hammer blows. Brett followed her, looking back at me with confusion and fear. I watched them go. Goldberg closed his folder. "That went well," he said. I looked at the shattered water pitcher on the floor. "It is just the beginning," I said. "She still thinks this is about money. She does not know what is coming next." "What is coming next?" Goldberg asked. I looked at the door where she had exited. "The truth," I said. "And the truth is going to hurt a lot more than losing a sale." I turned to the bank manager. "I am sorry about the mess, ma'am," I said. "Put it on my bill." I walked out of the bank. The sun was still shining, but for Tiffany the storm had just begun. She was about to find out that being the CEO's wife meant nothing when the chairman was the one who taught him how to swim. And I was just getting started. The silence in the motel room after the bank meeting was heavy, but it was not empty. It was filled with ghosts. I sat in the dim light of the flickering television and let my mind drift back 20 years to a rainy Tuesday on the Detroit docks. That was the day my life as a laborer ended, and my life as a silent guardian began. I remembered the sound of the cable snapping. It sounded like a gunshot. Then came the scream of bending metal and the crushing weight of a shipping container swinging loose. It missed my head by inches, but it caught my leg. I spent 6 months in a hospital bed learning how to walk again with a titanium rod in my hip. The settlement check from the shipping company was substantial. It was blood money paid for by my pain and my inability to ever work the line again. Marcus was 20 years old then. He was full of fire and ambition, but he was green. He had big dreams of starting a logistics company, of modernizing the way freight moved across the country. He had the vision, but he lacked the discipline. I saw how he looked at the settlement check. He saw fast cars and fancy offices. I saw a future that needed insurance. So I made a deal with him. I told him I would fund his dream. I would give him every penny of my settlement to buy his first fleet of trucks. But there was a condition. We would incorporate in Nevada. We would create a parent company called Red Rock Holdings, named after the state park where I took him fishing when he was a boy. Red Rock would hold 51% of the stock, and I, Augustus King, would be the sole signatory for Red Rock. I remember the look on his face. He was hurt. He thought I did not trust him. I told him, "Son, it is not that I do not trust you. It is that I do not trust the world. The world is full of sharks, Marcus, and one day you might meet one that you do not see coming. I want to be the anchor that keeps you from being dragged out to sea." He signed the papers. Over the years, as the company grew and he became a millionaire, he forgot about the anchor. He forgot that he did not own the ship he was captain of. But I never forgot. I paid the annual filing fees for Red Rock every January. I kept the corporate seal in my safe. I watched from the shadows as he married Tiffany. I watched her spend his money. I watched her isolate him. And I prayed that I would never have to use the power I held. But prayers are not always answered. Sometimes you have to stop praying and start fighting. A knock on the motel door pulled me back to the present. It was a soft knock. Tentative. I knew who it was. The shark had circled back. I opened the door. Tiffany was standing there. She had changed out of her aggressive white dress into jeans and a soft blue sweater. She had wiped off the heavy makeup. She was holding a brown paper bag from a local deli. She looked like the girl Marcus had introduced me to 10 years ago, the girl who pretended to like my cooking and laughed at my jokes. "Can I come in, Gus?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly. "I brought you a sandwich. I know you like pastrami." I looked at her. I looked at the performance. It was impressive. If I did not know she had injected my son with horse tranquilizers, I might have believed she was just a grieving widow who had lost her temper. I stepped back and let her in. Not because I wanted the sandwich, but because I wanted to hear the offer. She walked in and placed the bag on the wobbly table. She looked around the room with exaggerated sadness. "Oh, Gus," she sighed. "You should not be staying in a place like this. It breaks my heart." "You broke your own heart, Tiffany," I said, remaining standing. "Stop the act. What do you want?" She turned to me, her eyes filling with tears. "Gus, I am sorry about what happened at the bank. I was just so stressed. Losing Marcus. It has destroyed me. I am not thinking clearly. When that lawyer said you owned the company, I felt betrayed. I felt like Marcus had lied to me our whole marriage. He did not lie, I said. He protected the company." Tiffany nodded, wiping a tear. "I understand that now. I do. And I want to make things right. I want us to be a family again, Gus. You are the only link I have left to him." I said nothing. I just watched her. She took a step closer. "Look, Gus, the buyers are still interested. They called me. They are willing to wait 48 hours. If we sign the papers together, if Red Rock Holdings approves the sale, we can split the money." There it was. The pivot. $12 million, Gus, she whispered. "That is $6 million for you. You could move to Florida. You could buy a condo on the beach. You could have nurses to take care of you. You would never have to worry about anything again. Is that not what Marcus would have wanted? For his father to be taken care of?" I looked at her face. It was a mask of concern, but behind the eyes I saw the calculation. She needed my signature. She needed it desperate enough to offer me half. "You want me to sign?" I asked. "Yes," she said eagerly. "Just sign the approval. We take the cash. We walk away. We can put this whole ugly mess behind us." I walked over to the table and picked up the sandwich bag. I dropped it into the trash can. "I do not want $6 million, Tiffany," I said. She blinked. "What? What do you mean? It is $6 million. You are 72 years old. What else could you possibly want? I want to know why there was an EpiPen in the trash can," I said. The room went deadly silent. Tiffany froze. Her mouth opened slightly, then closed. Her eyes darted to the side, then back to me. "I do not know what you are talking about," she said, her voice losing its softness. "I think you do," I said, stepping closer. "Marcus was allergic to alcohol. You said he was drunk. If he was drunk, he would have used the pen, or he would be dead from shock. But he did not use it. It was full, and he did not die from shock." Tiffany took a step back. "You are confusing things, Gus. You are old. Your memory is going." "My memory is fine," I said, "and my eyesight is perfect. I see a woman who is terrified. I see a woman who tried to sell a company she did not own to run away with a boyfriend she should not have." The mask fell off completely then. The soft daughter-in-law vanished. The shark returned. She straightened her spine. Her face hardened into a sneer. "You think you are so smart?" she spat. "You think because you found some old paperwork and a piece of trash you can stop me? I already stopped you," I said. "The accounts are frozen. The sale is dead. You have nothing, Tiffany. No money, no house, no company." She laughed. It was a cold, ugly sound. "You think Red Rock Holdings makes you powerful?" she said, stepping toward me. "It makes you a target, Gus." "I asked you to leave," I said. "No," she hissed. "You listen to me, old man. You are going to sign those papers. You are going to call your lawyer and tell him to unfreeze the accounts, and you are going to do it by tomorrow morning, or what I asked. Or I will burn it all down," she said. "I will destroy the company's reputation. I will release records showing Marcus was embezzling money. I will fake them if I have to. I will make sure his name is dragged through the mud so deep that by the time I am done, King Logistics will be worth zero. You will inherit nothing but a scandal." "You would destroy his legacy just to spite me?" I asked. "I will destroy his legacy to get what is mine," she screamed. "I spent 10 years with that boring man. I deserve that money." She walked to the door and opened it. Then she stopped. "And Gus," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper, "be careful walking around this neighborhood at night. Accidents happen. Old men fall downstairs. They get mugged. They disappear." She looked past me to the window. "Brett is very upset about the car," she said. "He has a bit of a temper. I would hate for him to pay you a visit when I am not around to calm him down." "Is that a threat, Tiffany?" I asked. "It is a promise," she said. "You have until tomorrow morning. Sign the papers or prepare for a funeral. And this time, it will be yours." She slammed the door. I stood there in the silence. My heart was beating fast, but not from fear. It was beating with adrenaline. She had just made a mistake. A massive mistake. She had threatened me. And she had admitted that she was desperate. I walked to the window and looked out through the blinds. I saw her get into a black SUV parked down the street. Brett was in the driver's seat. I saw him look toward my room. He made a shape with his hand. A gun. I let the blind fall back into place. They thought they could scare me with muscles and vague threats. They thought I was just an old man with a piece of paper. They did not know about the file I had in my briefcase. They did not know about the toxicology report. And they definitely did not know that I had recorded the entire conversation. I pulled my phone out of my shirt pocket. The voice recorder app was still running. I pressed stop and saved the file. Threats. Attempted extortion. Admission of motive. I had enough to bury her civilly, but I needed more for the murder charge. I needed to connect Brett directly to the act. I looked at the phone. Tomorrow morning she expected a signature. Instead, she was going to get a war. But she was right about one thing. I needed to be careful. A cornered animal is the most dangerous kind, and Brett looked like the kind of animal who enjoyed biting. I went to my suitcase and reached into the lining. I pulled out a heavy wrench. It was a 24-inch pipe wrench, solid steel. It had been my father's. It was not a gun, but in the hands of a man who spent 40 years turning valves on steam pipes, it was a formidable object. I placed it on the nightstand next to the bed. "Come on, Brett," I whispered. "Come and get your money." I turned off the light and sat in the chair facing the door. I would not sleep tonight. I would wait. And while I waited, I would plan the next move. Because tomorrow, I was not just going to defend the company. I was going to bait the trap for the killer. The Los Angeles Superior Court looked like a cathedral built to worship money and confusion. The pillars were tall marble and cold, and the air inside smelled of floor wax and desperation. I walked up the wide stone steps with my lawyer Goldberg by my side. He looked ready for a fight, his briefcase bulging with the truth, but I told him to keep the latch closed. Today was not about winning. Today was about letting the enemy show her hand. Outside the courtroom, the circus had already arrived. Tiffany had done her work well. She had called every news station in the city. The cameras flashed like lightning storms as we approached the heavy wooden doors. Reporters shoved microphones in my face like spears. They shouted questions that were not really questions but accusations wrapped in question marks. "Mr. King, is it true you threatened your daughter-in-law? Mr. King, why are you trying to steal your dead son's money? Mr. King, do you resent her because she is white?" I said nothing. I looked straight ahead. My face was a stone mask. Inside, I was burning, but outside, I was ice. Tiffany wanted a villain, so I let the cameras film one. A big, silent black man in an old suit walking through a sea of shouting voices. It was the perfect image for the narrative she was spinning. We entered Department 402. The room was packed. Tiffany sat at the plaintiff's table. She was wearing a modest black dress with a high collar and a single strand of pearls. She looked like a saint. She looked like a broken angel. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue, even though her makeup was perfect. Sitting next to her was her lawyer, a man named Vincent Moretti. Moretti was famous for two things: his $3,000 suits and his ability to make juries cry on command. He looked at me with a sneer that was pure theater. The judge entered, Judge Harrison. He was an old man with tired eyes who had seen every lie Los Angeles had to offer. He sat down and banged his gavel. The sound echoed like a gunshot. "We are here for the preliminary hearing regarding the estate of Marcus King and the ownership dispute of King Logistics," he said. "Mr. Moretti, you may proceed." Moretti stood up. He did not walk to the podium. He walked to the jury box, even though there was no jury today. He was performing for the gallery. He was performing for the reporters in the back row. "Your Honor," he began, his voice smooth, like warm honey. "We are here today because of a tragedy. A young man, Marcus King, died suddenly and tragically. And while his widow, my client Tiffany King, is still paralyzed by grief, she is being attacked. Attacked not by a stranger, but by her own father-in-law." He pointed a manicured finger at me. "Augustus King claims he owns his son's company," Moretti continued. "He claims he is the chairman of a shell company called Red Rock Holdings. He is using obscure paperwork from 20 years ago to hold my client hostage, to freeze her accounts, to starve her out of her own home." Moretti walked back to Tiffany and placed a protective hand on her shoulder. Tiffany looked down and let out a soft sob. It was perfectly timed. "But why, Your Honor?" Moretti asked, turning back to the judge. "Is it because of the law?" "No, it is because of hate. Mr. King has never accepted Tiffany. He comes from a different time, a different world. He could not stand seeing his successful son married to a white woman. He could not stand that his son chose love over his father's prejudices. And now that Marcus is gone, this man is trying to erase his son's choices. He is trying to punish the woman his son loved. I sat there and listened to him rewrite my life. I listened to him turn my love for Marcus into hate. I listened to him turn my protection of the company into greed. My hands were folded on the table. I did not move. I did not frown. I watched Tiffany. She was watching me through her fingers, checking to see if the knife was going in deep enough. Goldberg leaned over to me. "Let me object," he whispered. "This is character assassination. It is irrelevant." "No," I whispered back. "Let him talk. Let him put it all on the record." Moretti finished his speech and walked back to his table. He picked up a document, a single sheet of paper sealed in a plastic protector. "Your Honor," Moretti said, his voice dropping to a dramatic whisper. "Mr. King claims that Red Rock Holdings owns the company based on a charter from 20 years ago. But people change, plans change, and wills change." He walked up to the bench and handed the document to the judge. "We are submitting into evidence a holographic will and a corporate amendment signed by Marcus King just 2 weeks before his death," Moretti announced. The room went silent. I felt Goldberg stiffen beside me. "In this document," Moretti continued, "Marcus King explicitly revokes all previous powers of attorney. He dissolves the authority of Red Rock Holdings, and he transfers 100% of all assets, business and personal, to his wife, Tiffany King. He states clearly that he is the sole owner of King Logistics and that his father, Augustus King, has no legal standing in the company." Goldberg looked at me. His eyes were wide. "You did not tell me there was a new will," he hissed. "There isn't one," I said calmly. Judge Harrison put on his reading glasses. He studied the paper for a long time. Then he looked at me. "Mr. King," the judge said, "this document appears to be notarized. The signature matches the samples on file." I looked at the document across the room. I did not need to see it up close. I knew it was a fake. Marcus was meticulous. If he had changed the company structure, he would have filed it with the Secretary of State in Nevada. He would have called a board meeting. He would have told me. He would not have written it on a piece of paper and handed it to his wife. But more importantly, I knew Marcus's signature. I taught him how to write it. The loop on the K, the sharp line of the T. A forger can copy the shape, but they cannot copy the rhythm. Goldberg stood up. "Your Honor, we contest the validity of this document. We request a forensic handwriting analysis. We request to depose the notary." Moretti jumped in. "Of course they contest it. They are desperate. This is a stalling tactic, Your Honor. The widow needs access to funds now. She has funeral expenses. She has a mortgage. This man is trying to bleed her dry with legal fees." Judge Harrison looked at the two lawyers. He rubbed his temples. I am inclined to agree with the plaintiff, the judge said. The document appears valid on its face. Until proven otherwise, the court recognizes this amendment. I am lifting the freezing order on the operating accounts of King Logistics. Mrs. King is granted temporary executorship of the estate. Tiffany let out a gasp of joy. She hugged Moretti. However, the judge continued, raising a hand. I am keeping the personal accounts of Mr. Augustus King separate, and I am ordering a full probate hearing in 30 days to finalize the validity of this will. If this document is proven to be forged, the consequences will be severe. Do you understand, Mrs. King? Tiffany stood up. She looked the judge in the eye. I understand, Your Honor, she said, her voice clear and strong. It is not a forgery. Marcus wrote it in front of me. He wanted to protect me from exactly this kind of situation. The judge banged his gavel. Hearing adjourned. The courtroom erupted. Reporters shouted. Tiffany and Moretti hugged again. They had won. They had unlocked the bank accounts. They had humiliated me. Goldberg packed his briefcase furiously. This is a disaster, he muttered. Gus, why did you stop me? I could have torn that argument apart. Now she has access to millions. She can drain the accounts before the next hearing. I stood up slowly. I buttoned my jacket. She will not drain the accounts, Goldberg, I said. Why not, he asked. Because now she feels safe, I said. She thinks the war is over. She thinks the judge is on her side. She is going to get careless. We walked out of the courtroom. The hallway was a gauntlet. The cameras were waiting. Mr. King, a reporter from Channel 5 shouted, shoving a microphone into my chest. The judge ruled against you. He said you are driven by prejudice. Do you have anything to say to your daughter-in-law? I stopped. I looked at the camera. I looked at the red recording light. I saw Tiffany standing down the hall. She was smiling at me, a cruel, victorious smile. She mouthed the words, "Checkmate, old man." I looked back at the reporter. I have nothing to say to her, I said. The truth does not need a microphone, it just needs time. I pushed past them and walked toward the elevator. Goldberg caught up to me. Gus, seriously. That will. If it is a good forgery, we are in trouble. It is not a good forgery, I said, pressing the down button. How do you know? Goldberg asked. Because Marcus never signed his full name on legal documents, I said. He always initialed the bottom right corner of every page. It was a habit from the shipping manifests. If that document has his full signature on the last page but no initials on the others, it is fake. Goldberg looked at me. Did you see the other pages? No, I said. But I know my son, and I know Tiffany. She is lazy. She would copy the signature from a check or a birthday card. She would not know about the initials because she never read his work papers. The elevator doors opened. Goldberg smiled. A shark smile. So we let her spend the money, he said. We let her commit wire fraud. We let her commit perjury by testifying that she saw him sign it. Exactly, I said. Today she did not just win a motion. She signed a confession. She put a fake document into the court record. That is a felony. We walked out into the bright Los Angeles sun. It was blinding. She has the money now, I said. Watch where it goes, Goldberg. Watch every penny. Because she is not going to pay the mortgage. She is going to pay the killer. Who is the killer? Goldberg asked, lowering his voice. The man driving the getaway car, I said, pointing to the street. A neon green convertible pulled up to the curb. Brett was behind the wheel wearing his expensive sunglasses. Tiffany ran down the steps and jumped into the car. She kissed him. They laughed. They peeled away from the curb, leaving a cloud of exhaust smoke. They looked like the perfect couple. Young, rich, victorious. They did not know that they were driving straight into a trap. They did not know that by producing that fake will, Tiffany had just given me the jurisdiction to bring in the FBI. Forgery of corporate documents across state lines. Wire fraud. I took out my phone. I had a text message from Kalani in Hawaii. DNA confirmed. It is Marcus. The warrant is ready. I looked at the text. Then I looked at the empty street where the green car had vanished. Enjoy the money, Tiffany, I whispered. Buy yourself something nice. You are going to need something to wear to your arraignment. I turned to Goldberg. Let's go get some lunch, I said. I am suddenly very hungry. Goldberg laughed, shaking his head. You are a cold son of a bitch, Gus. No, I said, walking toward my rental car. I am just a father who is done being patient. Now we take off the gloves. The rain outside the Blue Horizon Motel had turned into a steady gray drizzle that washed the grime off the parking lot but could not wash away the feeling of dread settling in my stomach. It was Tuesday night. 24 hours had passed since the judge had handed Tiffany the keys to the kingdom. 24 hours of silence from the main house. I knew what they were doing. They were moving money. They were celebrating. They were probably toasting to the senile old man they had defeated in court. I sat at the wobbly desk with my laptop open. The screen was the only source of light in the room, casting a pale blue glow on my hands. Hands that were shaking not from age but from anticipation. A notification pinged softly. It was an encrypted email from Lieutenant Kalani. The subject line was blank. The body of the email contained only 3 words. Do not blink. Attached was a video file. It was massive. The download bar crawled across the screen slowly. 90%, 95, complete. I put on my reading glasses. I took a deep breath. I clicked play. The video was grainy, black and white footage from a security camera. The timestamp in the corner read 10 p.m. on the night Marcus died. The location tag said Maui Resort Corridor B, 4th floor. I watched the empty hallway for a few seconds. The carpet pattern was dizzying, even in monochrome. Then a door opened. My heart stopped. It was Marcus. He walked out of his room. He was wearing his swim trunks and a t-shirt. He looked tired. He rubbed the back of his neck. He walked down the hall toward the elevator, presumably heading to the ice machine, or maybe just to get some air. He looked so alive. He looked so solid. It was the first time I had seen him moving in days, and the urge to reach into the screen and pull him back was so strong it made my chest ache. He disappeared around the corner. The hallway remained empty for 2 minutes. Then the elevator doors at the far end opened. Tiffany stepped out. She was wearing a bikini with a sheer cover-up. She looked around nervously, checking the empty hall. She waved her hand. Brett stepped out behind her. I leaned closer to the screen. The image was clear enough to see the expressions on their faces. They were not grieving. They were not fighting. They were conspirators. Brett pulled Tiffany into a corner where they thought the camera could not see them. He pinned her against the wall. He kissed her. It was a hungry, violent kiss. Tiffany wrapped her arms around his neck, laughing. They were celebrating before the crime had even been committed. I felt a surge of bile rise in my throat. My son was walking down the hall, probably thinking about how to save his marriage, and his wife was 50 feet away making out with his murderer. But the kiss was not the smoking gun. It was what happened next. Tiffany pulled away and whispered something to Brett. She pointed toward Marcus's room. Brett nodded. He reached into the pocket of his board shorts. He pulled out a small object. I paused the video. I zoomed in. The pixels blurred, but the shape was unmistakable. It was a syringe. It was not an EpiPen. An EpiPen is a thick plastic tube. This was a slender medical syringe with a plunger, the kind used to deliver precise doses of liquid. I hit play. Brett held the syringe up to the light, checking the dosage. He flicked the side of it with his finger just like a doctor would to remove air bubbles. He looked professional. He looked practiced. Tiffany handed him a key card. It was the spare key to the room. Brett took the key. He walked down the hall toward Marcus's door. He did not knock. He slid the card into the lock. The light turned green. He slipped inside. Tiffany stayed in the hall. She leaned against the wall, checking her nails. She was the lookout. I watched the timestamp tick by. 1 minute, 2 minutes, 3 minutes. Marcus was not in the room. I had seen him leave. So Brett was lying in wait. He was hiding in the bathroom or behind the curtains, waiting for my son to return. The video cut to a different angle, the lobby camera. I saw Marcus walking through the lobby carrying a bucket of ice. He looked sad. He stopped to look at a brochure for island tours. He had no idea that upstairs death was waiting for him in the dark. I could not watch the rest. I knew what happened. Marcus went back to the room. He opened the door. Maybe he saw Brett, maybe he did not. The injection would have been fast. Ketamine works in seconds. Total paralysis. The inability to scream. Then they would have waited until the hallways were clear. They would have carried him out the back service exit. They would have driven him to the cliffs, and they would have thrown him into the black water while he was still conscious, but unable to move. I closed the laptop. The room felt freezing cold. I sat there for a long time, staring at the blank wall. I had seen evil before. I had seen men beaten on the docks. I had seen greed. But this was different. This was intimate betrayal. This was a wife murdering her husband, not in a fit of passion, but with the cold calculation of a butcher. My phone rang. It was Goldberg. "Gus," he said, his voice frantic. "I just got an alert from the bank. Tiffany just transferred $50,000 to a travel agent. She is booking tickets to Europe. One way. We need to file an appeal immediately. If we show the judge that the will might be forged, we can maybe get another freeze order." I listened to him panic. He was playing the game by the rules of civil court. He was thinking about assets and flight risks. "Goldberg," I said, my voice surprisingly steady, "do not file the appeal." "What?" Goldberg sputtered. "Are you crazy, Gus? She is going to run." "Let her run," I said. "Let her think she is free." "Gus." "You are not making sense," Goldberg said. "We are losing." "I am not trying to win a lawsuit anymore," Goldberg, I said. "I am trying to win a conviction." I hung up. Goldberg was a good lawyer, but he was a shark in a swimming pool. I needed a shark in the ocean. I reached into my bag and pulled out a large manila envelope. I put a flash drive containing the video inside. I added the toxicology report from Hawaii. I added the affidavit from Kalani stating that no cremation had taken place. And I added the printed logs of the bank transfer she had just attempted. I wrote an address on the front of the envelope. Office of the United States Attorney, District of Central California, Criminal Division. This was no longer a dispute about who owned a logistics company. This was a conspiracy to commit murder across state lines. They had traveled from California to Hawaii to kill a U.S. citizen for financial gain. That made it a federal crime. That made it the FBI's jurisdiction. I did not want to show this video to Judge Harrison. If I showed it in civil court, Moretti would argue that it was circumstantial. He would argue that the syringe contained vitamins or insulin. He would drag it out for months while Tiffany lived in my house. No. I wanted the element of surprise. I wanted the FBI to see this. I wanted them to build a RICO case. I wanted them to look at the wire fraud, the insurance fraud, and the murder as one giant web of lies. I put on my coat. I picked up the envelope. It felt heavy in my hand, lighter than a coffin, but heavier than a stone. I walked out of the motel room and drove to the main post office near the airport. It was open 24 hours. I walked up to the counter. The clerk was a young woman who looked like she would rather be anywhere else. "Certified mail," I said, sliding the envelope across the counter. "Signature required." She weighed it. She stamped it. Anything fragile, liquid, or hazardous inside, she recited mechanically. "Just the truth," I said. "And it is very hazardous." She looked at me weirdly but took my money. I watched her drop the envelope into the bin. It was done. The fuse was lit. It would take about 24 hours for that package to reach the desk of the U.S. Attorney. Another 24 hours for them to verify the video with Kalani. That gave Tiffany 2 days. 2 days to feel like a queen. 2 days to pack her bags for Europe. 2 days to think she had gotten away with the perfect crime. I walked back to my truck. I felt a strange sense of peace. The burden was no longer just mine. I had shared it with the most powerful law enforcement agency in the country. But I was not done. There was one more thing I had to do. Tiffany was planning a victory lap. I had seen the invitation on social media. A memorial and birthday celebration at the estate on Saturday night. She was going to combine mourning Marcus with celebrating her own 33rd birthday. It was grotesque. I started the engine. I was going to crash that party. Not to scream, not to fight. I was going to deliver a gift. I drove back to the motel, plotting the final scene. I needed to time it perfectly. The FBI would need time to mobilize. I needed to keep Tiffany in one place. I needed to keep her distracted. I would be the distraction. I would walk into that house one last time. I would look her in the eye, and I would smile. Because I knew something she did not. I knew that while she was drinking champagne and eating cake, agents in windbreakers were obtaining a warrant signed by a federal judge. I knew that the green convertible she bought was going to look very conspicuous in a prison parking lot. And I knew that Brett, the tough guy with the syringe, was going to cry like a baby when they put the cuffs on him. I pulled into the motel parking lot. The neon sign buzzed. Blue horizon. The horizon was not blue anymore. It was black, and the storm was coming. I went back into my room and lay down on the bed. For the first time in a week, I closed my eyes and really slept. I dreamt of Marcus. He was standing on the dock by the ocean. He was not dead. He was waiting. "Hold on, son," I whispered in my sleep. "Just a little longer. The cavalry is coming." Saturday night arrived not with a whimper but with a bass line that shook the windows of the neighborhood. It had been exactly 30 days since Marcus died. In a decent world, a widow would still be wearing black. She would be quietly reflecting on the life that was lost. She would be visiting the grave. But Tiffany King did not live in a decent world. She lived in a world where grief was just a marketing strategy and a funeral was just a prequel to a party. I parked my truck down the street from the estate. I did not want to give the valet my rusted Ford. I wanted to walk. I wanted to feel the pavement under my feet one last time before the world changed. The house, my house, Marcus's house, was lit up like a casino on the Vegas Strip. Spotlights swept across the night sky. Music pumped into the cool air, a thumping electronic rhythm that had no soul. The driveway was lined with cars that cost more than most people earn in a decade. Ferraris, Lamborghinis, Bentleys. It was billed as a memorial and birthday celebration, a dual event. A way to honor the dead while celebrating the living, she had said on the invitation. But as I walked up the long driveway, I saw no honoring. I saw a coronation. Tiffany was crowning herself the queen of a kingdom she had stolen with a syringe and a lie. I reached the front gate. A private security guard, a young man with a clipboard and an earpiece, stepped in front of me. He looked at my worn-out suit. He looked at my scuffed shoes. He looked at the small wrapped box in my hand. "Name, please," he asked, looking bored. "Augustus King," I said. He scanned the list. "I am sorry, sir. You are not on the list." I looked at him. I did not raise my voice. I did not get angry. I just projected the authority I had earned over 40 years of leading men on the docks. "Check again, son," I said. "Under family, or maybe under owner." He looked at me hesitant. Then he looked at the house. He clearly did not want a scene. "Look, old-timer," he said, lowering his voice. "Mrs. King gave strict instructions. No uninvited guests. Especially not—" He trailed off. "Especially not the father of the dead husband," I finished for him. "It is okay, son. I am not here to drink the champagne. I am just here to drop off a gift. It is her birthday after all." I held up the box. It was a simple cardboard box wrapped in brown paper. The guard hesitated. He was young. He did not know about the war. He just saw an old man with a present. "Make it quick," he said, stepping aside. "And stay out of the photos." I walked past him. The path to the front door was lined with ice sculptures. One was a swan, another was a dolphin. A dolphin. The irony was so thick I could taste it. My son was murdered in the ocean, and she had put frozen sea creatures on her lawn as decoration. I entered the main hall. The house had been transformed. The furniture I remembered, the oak tables, the leather armchairs, was gone, replaced by white, sleek, modern pieces that looked like they belonged in a dentist's office. The walls were covered in projected images of Tiffany. Tiffany modeling, Tiffany on a boat, Tiffany laughing. There were a few pictures of Marcus, but he was always in the background, a prop in her life story. The crowd was dense, hundreds of people. I did not recognize a single soul. These were not Marcus's friends. These were leeches, hangers-on, people who smelled money and came running. They drank champagne from crystal flutes and shouted over the music. They laughed. They danced. I moved through them like a ghost, a tall, dark shadow in a sea of sequins and white tuxedos. People bumped into me and recoiled, spilling their drinks. They looked at me with disgust, then confusion. Who let the help in? Why is that old man here? I ignored them. My eyes were locked on the stage that had been erected in the main ballroom. There she was. Tiffany stood in the center of the stage. She was wearing a red dress, a bright blood-red gown that clung to her body and trailed on the floor. She held a microphone in one hand and a glass of vintage champagne in the other. She looked radiant. She looked victorious. Next to her stood Brett. He was wearing a tuxedo that was too shiny. He had his hand on the small of her back, claiming her. He looked out at the crowd with a smug grin. He thought he had made it. He thought he was the king. The music faded. The lights dimmed, focusing on the couple on stage. Tiffany raised her glass. The room went silent. "Thank you all for coming," she said, her voice amplified through the massive speakers. "It has been a difficult month, the hardest month of my life. Losing Marcus was tragic." She paused for effect. She looked down, a perfect performance of sorrow. But she continued, lifting her head. "I know Marcus would not want me to mourn forever. He loved life. He loved this company, and he loved me. And that is why tonight is so important. Tonight we are not just celebrating my birthday, we are celebrating the future. She gestured to the screen behind her. The logo of King Logistics appeared. As the sole heir to the King estate, she announced, "I am proud to say that I am stepping up. I will be taking over the leadership of the company. And with Brett by my side as my new Chief Operations Officer, we are going to take this legacy to new heights." The crowd erupted in applause. They cheered. They whistled. I stood in the back of the room near the kitchen doors. I felt a cold rage settle in my bones. She was erasing him. She was rewriting history in real time, and she was putting the man who killed him in the chair he used to sit in. It was time. I started walking. I did not run. I walked with the slow, heavy gait of a man who carries a sledgehammer. I walked down the center aisle. People started to notice. The applause faltered. Heads turned. The whisper started at the back of the room and rippled forward like a wave. "Who is that? Is that the father? Oh my God, look at him." I kept walking. My eyes never left Tiffany's face. She saw me when I was halfway to the stage. Her smile froze. The glass in her hand tilted, spilling champagne onto her red dress. She nudged Brett. Brett looked up and saw me. His smug grin vanished, replaced by the tense aggression of a thug. I reached the foot of the stage. The music had stopped completely. The DJ had sensed the tension and cut the track. The silence was deafening. It was heavy and thick. Tiffany recovered first. She stepped to the edge of the stage, looking down at me from her pedestal. "Gus," she said into the microphone. Her voice echoed around the room. "What are you doing here? I thought I told you." I did not let her finish. I did not need a microphone. My voice was trained in the union halls where we had to shout over the sound of cranes and engines. "Happy birthday, Tiffany," I said. The sound of my voice boomed through the quiet room. "You invited the whole world to celebrate," I continued. I did not want to be the only one who forgot. Tiffany laughed nervously. She looked at the crowd, trying to get them on her side. "Well, that is sweet, Gus," she said condescendingly. "But as you can see, this is a private event, and you are not dressed for the occasion. Maybe you should go round the back to the kitchen. I am sure the caterers can find you a plate of leftovers." A few people in the crowd giggled. They thought it was a joke. They thought I was a senile relative crashing the party. I did not move. "I am not hungry, Tiffany," I said. "And I am not here for the food. I am here because I have something that belongs to you. Something you forgot to check." I lifted the box. Brett stepped forward. He moved in front of Tiffany, puffed up like a rooster. "Get out of here, old man," he barked. "Before I throw you out, you are trespassing." I looked at Brett. I looked at the hands that had held the syringe. "You can try, son," I said softly. "But I would not recommend it, not tonight." Tiffany put a hand on Brett's arm. She was curious now. She saw the box. Greed is a powerful instinct. She wondered what was inside. Maybe she thought it was the original will. Maybe she thought it was a surrender. Maybe she thought it was the keys to the safety deposit box she could not open. "Let him speak, Brett," she said. She looked at me. "What is in the box, Gus? Is it a peace offering? Did you finally come to your senses and sign the papers?" I walked up the stairs to the stage. I moved slowly. Every step was a drumbeat. I stood next to them. I was taller than Tiffany. I was almost as tall as Brett, but I was wider. I smelled of Old Spice and rain. They smelled of expensive perfume and fear. I placed the box on the podium next to her champagne glass. "It is not a peace offering," I said, turning to face the crowd. "And it is not a signature." I looked out at the sea of faces. "You are all here to celebrate the legacy of Marcus King," I said. "You are all here to toast the new owners, but you do not know the history of this family. You do not know what Marcus left behind." Tiffany's eyes narrowed. "Gus, stop this. Security. Where is security?" The guard from the gate started running toward the stage. But I was faster. I put my hand on the lid of the box. "You said Marcus gave you everything, Tiffany," I said, looking her in the eye. "You said you were his soulmate. You said you were carrying his future." I paused. But Marcus had a secret, Tiffany. A secret he kept even from me until the very end. A secret that makes your entire story fall apart. Security was climbing the stairs. I ripped the brown paper off the box. Inside was not a bomb. It was not a weapon. It was a thick stack of medical files bound with a red ribbon, and right on top was a large, glossy photograph. I picked up the photograph and turned it toward the camera crew that was live streaming the event. Open it, Tiffany, I said, sliding the file toward her. Read it to your guests. Read them the medical report from Drowning's clinic dated 10 years ago. Tiffany looked at the file. She saw the header. Her face went white, whiter than the ice sculptures outside. What is this? She whispered. It is the reason Marcus never wanted children, I said, my voice carrying to the back of the room. It is the proof that the baby you say you are carrying, the heir you are using to claim the estate, cannot possibly be a king. The room gasped. It was a collective intake of breath that sucked the air out of the ballroom. Brett froze. He looked at Tiffany. He looked at her stomach. He looked at the file. I leaned into the microphone one last time. Happy birthday, Tiffany, I said. I hope you like the truth, because it is the only thing you are going to get from my son. Tiffany stared at me. Her hands shook. The champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered on the stage. And in that silence, in the shatter of crystal, the party ended and the reckoning began. The sound of the champagne glass hitting the floor was sharp and violent, a sudden punctuation mark that ended the party and started the trial. The crystal shattered into 1,000 diamonds, scattering across the stage under the red lights. For a moment, nobody moved. The DJ did not play a sound. The waiters froze with their trays. Even the ice sculptures seemed to be listening. The silence was absolute, heavy and suffocating, like the air before a tornado touches down. Tiffany stared at the file I had slid across the podium. Her hands were shaking so badly she could not pick it up. She recognized the logo on the cover. It was from the Mayo Clinic, a place we had visited 20 years ago when she was just a stranger to us and Marcus was just a boy fighting a fever that almost killed him. What is this? She whispered again, her voice barely audible over the hum of the speakers. Read it, Tiffany, I said, my voice calm and booming through the microphone. Read it to the cameras. Read it to the investors you lied to. Read it to the judge who gave you temporary control of my son's estate based on your condition. She did not read it. She took a step back as if the paper was burning hot. So I read it for her. I opened the folder. I did not need to look at the words. I had memorized them sitting in a hospital waiting room 2 decades ago while my wife cried on my shoulder. I pulled out the summary page and held it up. The camera lights flashed blindingly fast. In 1998, I said, addressing the crowd, Marcus King contracted a severe case of mumps. He was 12 years old. The fever spiked to 104 degrees. It caused a condition called orchitis. I looked at Brett. He was sweating now. The confident smirk was gone, replaced by the pale, clammy look of a man who realizes the floor is dropping out from under him. For those of you who are not doctors, I continued, my voice hard as steel, that means inflammation. Severe inflammation. We tried everything. But the damage was permanent. The doctors told us the day he was discharged. I turned back to Tiffany. They told us Marcus would never be able to father children. He was completely sterile. 0 count. It was the great tragedy of his life, Tiffany. It was the reason he hesitated to marry you. He told me he felt broken. He told me he did not want to deny you a family. I took a step closer to her. She looked small now. The red dress looked like a costume that did not fit. But you told him it did not matter, I said. You told him you loved him anyway. You told him you did not need children to be happy. The crowd began to murmur. The sound grew louder, a mix of shock and confusion. They were doing the math. But last week, I said, raising my voice over the whispers, you stood in a courtroom. You stood in front of a judge, and you swore under oath that you are 3 months pregnant with Marcus King's child. You used that pregnancy to secure your status as the sole heir. You used that unborn baby to lock me out of my own family. I pointed a finger at her stomach. So I have a question for you, Tiffany. A question that every person in this room and every federal prosecutor watching this live stream is asking right now. If Marcus was sterile since 1998, who was the father of that baby? The question hung in the air like smoke. Tiffany looked at Brett. It was an involuntary reflex, a desperate glance for help, but it was the most damning thing she could have done. The camera caught it. The crowd caught it. Brett took a step back. He looked like he wanted to run. He looked like he wanted to vomit. It is a lie, Tiffany screamed suddenly. Her voice shrieked through the speakers, causing feedback that made everyone wince. He is lying. He forged these papers. Marcus was fine. We were trying. We saw doctors. This is just a crazy old man trying to humiliate me. She lunged for the podium, trying to grab the file. Security, she yelled. Get him out of here. He is trespassing. He is attacking me. The security guard who had been running up the stairs hesitated. He looked at the file on the podium. He looked at me. He looked at the hysterical woman in the red dress. He stopped. He was a low-wage employee. He did not want to be part of a federal crime. "I am not lying, Tiffany," I said, slamming my hand down on the file. "And you know it. Marcus had his yearly physicals. The records are digital. They are on the servers of his insurance company. They are on the servers of the clinic. You can tear up this paper, but you cannot tear up the database." I turned to Brett. "And you, son," I said. "You look a little green. Maybe you should sit down. Or maybe you should call your lawyer. Because DNA does not lie. And when they test that baby, they are going to find a match. But it won't be a king match. It will be a personal trainer match." Brett's face went from pale to purple. He clenched his fists. "Shut your mouth, old man," he snarled, stepping toward me. "You do not know what you are talking about. Do not come any closer," I warned him, my voice dropping to a dangerous growl. "I am not the one you need to worry about." Tiffany was losing control completely. She grabbed the microphone stand and tried to swing it. "Stop it!" she screamed. "Stop listening to him. The music. Somebody play the music. Turn off the cameras." But nobody turned off the cameras. The reporters in the back were typing furiously on their phones. This was not a society page story anymore. This was the lead story on the 11 o'clock news. Widow fakes pregnancy to steal empire. Father-in-law exposes dark secret at memorial. I looked out at the guests, the friends who had drunk my son's wine, the investors who had shaken Tiffany's hand. They were backing away. They were putting distance between themselves and the stage. They smelled the stench of fraud, and they did not want it on their clothes. "You built a house of cards, Tiffany," I said, "and you built it on a foundation of lies. You thought because Marcus was quiet, he was weak. You thought because I was old, I was stupid." I picked up the file and held it out to the nearest reporter who had rushed to the edge of the stage. "Here," I said. "Verify it. Call the Mayo Clinic. The patient number is on the first page." The reporter grabbed the file like it was gold bullion. Tiffany let out a primal scream. It was the sound of an animal caught in a trap. "You ruined everything," she sobbed. "You ruined my birthday. You ruined my life." "I did not ruin your life, Tiffany," I said. "You ruined it the moment you decided my son was worth more dead than alive. You ruined it the moment you let that man into your bed and into my son's house." I looked at Brett again. "And you," I said, "you thought you hit the jackpot. You thought you were going to drive the Ferraris and live in the mansion. But you forgot one thing." Brett glared at me, his eyes wild. "What did I forget?" he spat. "You forgot that Marcus was a swimmer," I said. "And swimmers have strong lungs, even when they are drugged, even when they are dying." Brett froze. His eyes widened. "What do you mean?" he whispered. "I mean the autopsy is finished, son." I lied. I pushed the bluff because I saw the fear in his eyes, and they found skin cells under his fingernails, from where he grabbed the person who injected him. It was a gamble, but it paid off instantly. Brett looked at his own arm. He rubbed a spot on his forearm subconsciously, a spot where a scratch might have healed weeks ago. The guilt was written all over him in neon lights. Tiffany saw him rub his arm. She saw the look on his face. And for the first time she realized that her partner in crime was going to crack. "You idiot," she hissed at Brett. "Stop looking at him. He is bluffing." "I am not bluffing," I said. "And neither are the people waiting outside." As if on cue, the blue and red lights began to flash through the high windows of the ballroom. No sirens. Just the silent, terrifying strobe light of authority. The heavy oak doors at the back of the room swung open. It was not the party security. It was a team of men in windbreakers with yellow letters on the back. FBI. The crowd parted like the Red Sea. Tiffany looked at the door. She looked at me. She looked at the shattered glass on the floor. Her coronation was over. "The party is finished, Tiffany," I said. I took the microphone off the stand and dropped it on the floor. The thud echoed through the silent room like a gavel slamming down. I walked down the stairs of the stage. I did not look back at them. I did not need to. I could smell the fear coming off them in waves. I walked toward the agents. The lead agent, a tall woman with a grim face, nodded at me as I passed. "Mr. King," she said, "we can take it from here." "Thank you, agent," I said. "They are all yours." I walked out into the cool night air. The ice dolphin was melting dripping water onto the pavement like tears. Inside, the screaming started again. But this time, it was not a scream of anger. It was the scream of someone who realizes there is nowhere left to run. The security guard's hand was inches from my shoulder when the world outside exploded into a kaleidoscope of red and blue light. It was not the soft ambient lighting of the party, and it was not the flash of paparazzi cameras. It was the harsh strobe of emergency bars cutting through the high windows of the ballroom, painting the white walls in alternating shades of violence and authority. The music, which had already died down to a murmur, stopped completely. The only sound left in the room was the heavy thrumming of idling engines outside, the kind of deep mechanical vibration that you feel in your teeth. The guard froze. He looked at the window, then he looked at me. His hand dropped to his side. He was a hired muscle for a party, but he knew the difference between a disturbance and a raid. He took a step back, putting distance between himself and the man he was supposed to throw out. I did not move. I just watched Tiffany. Her face was illuminated by the flashing lights, turning her skin purple, then red, then purple again. She looked like a statue of a saint that was cracking down the middle. She was staring at the main doors, the double oak doors that were currently vibrating. Then they burst open. It was not a polite entrance. It was a breach. 12 agents poured into the room. They moved like water flowing around the guests, filling the empty spaces, securing the exits. They were not wearing tuxedos. They were wearing navy blue windbreakers with yellow letters on the back. FBI. Behind them came the uniformed officers of the local police, their hands resting on their holsters, their faces grim. The crowd gasped. A woman near the front dropped her wine glass, and it shattered on the marble floor, a tiny echo of the glass Tiffany had broken moments before. The socialites and investors, the hangers-on, and the sycophants scrambled backward, pressing themselves against the walls, desperate to show that they were just spectators. They held their hands up, showing empty palms, terrified of being associated with whatever was happening on stage. The lead agent walked down the center aisle. It was Agent Vance, the woman I had met outside. She walked with a stride that ate up the distance, her eyes locked on the stage. She did not look at the ice sculptures. She did not look at the expensive artwork. She looked only at the two people standing under the spotlight. Tiffany grabbed the microphone again. Her hand was trembling so hard the mic rattled against her rings. "What is this?" she screeched, her voice thin and hysterical. "Who called the police? There is no emergency here. This is a private residence. Get out. Get out right now." She pointed a shaking finger at me. "Arrest him. That man is trespassing. He is harassing me. He is ruining my husband's memorial. Do your jobs and get him out of here." Agent Vance did not stop walking. She reached the foot of the stage and climbed the stairs. Her boots made a dull thud on the wood. She stood next to me, but she did not look at me. She looked at Tiffany. "Tiffany King," she said, her voice calm and amplified by the silence of the room. Tiffany straightened her spine, trying to summon the arrogance that had served her so well for so long. "I am Mrs. King," she snapped, "and you are interrupting a very expensive event. I want to see your badge number. I want to speak to your supervisor. My lawyer is right there." She gestured vaguely toward the crowd where Vincent Moretti had been standing. But Moretti was gone. The moment the FBI jackets appeared, the high-priced lawyer had vanished into the shadows, leaving his client to face the storm alone. Agent Vance pulled a folded document from her jacket pocket. It was thick. It was heavy. It was a federal warrant. "I am not here to talk to your lawyer, Mrs. King," Agent Vance said. "I am here to execute a federal arrest warrant issued by the United States District Court." Tiffany laughed. It was a brittle sound like dry leaves breaking. "Arrest warrant," she scoffed. "For what?" "Unpaid parking tickets. This is ridiculous." Agent Vance opened the document. She began to read. "Tiffany King, you are under arrest for conspiracy to commit murder in the first degree." The words hung in the air. Murder. The crowd let out a collective moan of shock. It was the sound of 100 people realizing they had been drinking champagne with a killer. Vance continued relentless. Wire fraud, insurance fraud, identity theft, forgery of corporate documents, and flight to avoid prosecution. Tiffany's face went slack. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She looked like she had been punched in the stomach, and Brett Miller Vance said, turning to the man standing next to Tiffany. Brett jumped. He looked around wildly. He looked at the back exit behind the stage. He looked at the side doors. Every exit was blocked by an agent with a hand on a weapon. "You are under arrest for murder in the first degree," Vance said. "Administration of a controlled substance resulting in death, and conspiracy to commit homicide." Brett made a noise that sounded like a whimper. The tough guy, the protector, The man who had threatened to throw me out was suddenly just a scared kid in a shiny suit. "This is a mistake," Tiffany screamed, suddenly finding her voice. It was a high, piercing shriek that made the hair on my arms stand up. "You are crazy. Murder. My husband drowned. It was an accident. Everyone knows it was an accident." She grabbed Brett's arm, digging her nails into his jacket. "Tell them, Brett. Tell them it was an accident." Brett pulled away from her. He looked at the agents. "I did not do anything," he stammered, his hands shaking. "She told me to do it. It was her idea. She said he was abusive. She said we needed the money." Brett, Tiffany yelled, slapping him across the face. "Shut up! Shut up, you idiot!" Two agents moved in. They grabbed Brett's arms. He did not fight. He collapsed, sagging into their grip, his legs giving out. They spun him around, and I heard the distinctive ratcheting sound of handcuffs clicking into place. Metal on metal. The sound of finality. Tiffany backed away. She retreated until her back hit the podium. She looked at the agents advancing on her. She looked at me. Her eyes were wide circles of panic. She was looking for an escape, a loophole, a lie that could save her, and in her desperation she grabbed onto the one thing she thought was her safety net. "You cannot arrest me!" she screamed. "You have no proof!" She looked at the crowd, pleading for a witness. "He drowned," she yelled. "I had him cremated. The ashes are in the house. You have nothing. No autopsy, no toxicology, no body." She pointed at me, her face twisted into a mask of pure venom. "This old man is lying. He is just making things up because he hates me. You cannot charge me with murder without a body. That is the law. Habeas corpus. I know my rights." I stood there and watched her dig her own grave. She was clinging to the cremation lie like a drowning woman clinging to a stone. She thought that because she had a jar of dirt on her mantle, she was safe. She thought that without a physical body, the police were powerless. Agent Vance stopped. She looked at Tiffany with an expression that was almost pity but mostly professional detachment. Mrs. King Vance said quietly, "We do not need a body to prove murder if we have a witness." Tiffany laughed again, hysterical and wild. "What witness?" she shrieked. "Brett. He is a liar. He will say anything to save himself. You have no credible witness." "We have a very credible witness," Vance said. "Who?" Tiffany demanded. "Who saw us?" "There was no one there. It was night. The hallway was empty." "You are right," Mrs. King Vance said. "The hallway was empty, except for the security cameras." Tiffany froze. "We have the video," Vance said. "We have the video of you handing Mr. Miller the key card. We have the video of Mr. Miller entering the room with a syringe. And we have the video of you celebrating in the hallway while your husband was dying inside." Tiffany shook her head. No. I checked. There were no cameras on that floor. I checked the diagrams." "You checked the old diagrams," Vance said. "The resort upgraded their security system 3 months ago. Hidden lenses, motion activated, high definition." Tiffany slumped against the podium. The fight was draining out of her, but she had one last burst of denial, one last attempt to control the narrative. "But the body," she whispered. "You still do not have the body. You cannot prove he died from the injection. Maybe he survived the shot. Maybe he really did drown. You cannot prove cause of death without a body." She looked up, her eyes gleaming with a twisted hope. "I cremated him. It is over. You can suspect me, but you cannot prove it." I stepped forward then. I walked past Agent Vance. I stood right in front of Tiffany. I was close enough to see the sweat beading on her forehead, close enough to smell the fear. "Tiffany," I said, my voice low and rumbling. She looked at me. "You really should have checked the urn," I said. "What?" she whispered. "If you had opened that jar you brought back from Hawaii, I said you would have seen that it was full of beach sand and charcoal." She stared at me confused. "There was no cremation, Tiffany," I said. Her eyes widened. "I stopped it," I said. "I called Kalani. I called the morgue. I told them to hold him." Tiffany started to shake. Her head moved back and forth in a jerky rhythm of denial. "No," she whimpered. "No. I have the certificate. I paid the man." "You paid a man to print a piece of paper," I said, "but you cannot pay death to go away." I leaned in closer. "Marcus is not in that jar, Tiffany. Marcus is in a federal morgue in Los Angeles. He flew in yesterday." She gasped, a sound of pure horror. "And this morning," I continued, "the medical examiner finished the second autopsy. The real one. Do you know what they found?" She put her hands over her ears. "I do not want to hear it. They found the ketamine, I said, pulling her hands down. They found the needle mark, and they found the skin cells under his fingernails. Skin cells that match Brett's DNA. I let go of her hands. He fought Tiffany. In those last seconds when the drug was taking over, he tried to fight. He marked his killer. Tiffany looked at Brett, who was being dragged off the stage. She looked at the agents. She looked at the crowd. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The body existed. The evidence existed. The video existed. There was no way out. The walls had closed in and there was no door left. She collapsed. It was not a graceful faint. Her legs simply stopped working. She slid down the front of the podium, her red dress bunching up around her. She sat on the floor of the stage, surrounded by broken glass and spilled champagne. She looked up at the ceiling and let out a wail that was not human. It was the sound of a soul realizing it was damned. Agent Vance nodded to her team. "Get her up." 2 agents moved in. They pulled Tiffany to her feet. She did not resist. She was limp, a rag doll in a couture gown. They pulled her arms behind her back. Click. Click. The handcuffs went on. I watched her. I watched the woman who had called me at 3:30 in the morning to tell me I was nothing. I watched the woman who had laughed at my eviction. I watched the woman who had murdered my son for money. She was crying now. Ugly, snotty tears that ruined her makeup. "Gus," she sobbed as they started to lead her away. "Gus, please, help me. I am pregnant. You cannot let them take me to jail. I am pregnant with your grandchild." I looked at her one last time. I picked up the medical file from the podium, the file that proved Marcus was sterile. I walked over to where she was standing. I tucked the file under her arm. "Take this with you, Tiffany," I said. "You might need it to explain to your new boyfriend in prison why the baby does not look like a king." She stared at me with hatred and despair. "Why?" she whispered. "Why couldn't you just die and leave us alone?" "Because I am a father," I said. "And fathers protect their children, even after they are gone." I nodded to Agent Vance. "Take her away." They dragged her across the stage and down the stairs. The crowd parted again, watching in silence as the queen of the evening was hauled out in chains. The flashing lights from outside caught the sequins on her dress, making them sparkle one last time before she disappeared into the back of a squad car. I stood alone on the stage. The music was gone. The party was over. I looked at the empty ballroom. I looked at the broken glass. It was done. The monster was in a cage. But as the adrenaline faded, I felt the weight of it all settle back onto my shoulders. I had won the war, but I had still lost the boy. I walked to the edge of the stage and sat down, my legs dangling over the side. I loosened my tie. I took a deep breath of the cool air. I checked my watch. It was midnight. "Happy birthday, Tiffany," I whispered to the empty room. "And goodbye." The ballroom was a sea of flashing lights and shocked silence, broken only by the sound of Tiffany screaming. She was fighting against the handcuffs, twisting her body like a trapped snake. Her red dress was torn at the shoulder and her hair was a wild halo around her face. She was not screaming for mercy. She was screaming for a technicality. She was screaming the one lie she thought could still save her. "You have no body," she shrieked, her voice bouncing off the high ceilings. "You cannot charge me with murder. I have the cremation certificate. I have the urn. It is in my living room. You are arresting an innocent woman based on a video that proves nothing. Maybe he was sick. Maybe I was giving him medicine. You have no proof of death." She looked at the crowd, her eyes wild and desperate, seeking anyone who would believe her. "Tell them," she yelled at the silent guests. "Tell them Marcus was cremated. You saw the urn. You saw me crying over it. If there is no body, there is no murder. That is the law." Agent Vance tightened her grip on Tiffany's arm, but she did not speak. She looked at me. She knew that this was my moment. She knew that the father deserved the final word. I walked over to the microphone stand that was still lying on the floor. I picked it up. I set it upright. The metal scraped against the floor, a harsh sound that made people flinch. I adjusted the height. I tapped the head of the microphone once. Thump. The sound echoed like a heartbeat through the massive speakers. I looked at Tiffany. She stopped screaming. She stared at me, panting, her chest heaving. She thought she had me. She thought that because she had burned something, she had destroyed the evidence. "You are right, Tiffany," I said, my voice calm and low, filling the room without effort. "You did burn something. You paid a lot of money for an expedited cremation. You stood there and watched the fire. You collected the ashes. Tiffany nodded frantically, a glimmer of hope returning to her eyes. Yes, she cried. Exactly. I watched him burn. So how can you have an autopsy? How can you have proof? You are lying, Gus. You are just a bitter old man making up stories to scare me. I leaned closer to the microphone. You watched a pine box burn, Tiffany, I said. You watched a box filled with driftwood and sand burn. You were so eager to get back to your boyfriend and your party that you never even checked inside the coffin. You just signed the paper and handed over the cash. Tiffany went still. Her face turned the color of old paper. But Marcus was not in that box. I continued. Because 2 hours before your little ceremony at the crematorium, I made a phone call. I called Lieutenant Kalani. I told him that there was a crime scene in progress. I told him to seize the body. I paused, letting the words sink in. While you were watching that fire, Tiffany, my son was being loaded into a refrigerated transport unit. He was not ash. He was evidence. No, she whispered. No. That is impossible. It is not impossible, I said. It is procedure. And last night, while you were getting your hair done for this party, while you were picking out your red dress, a federal transport plane landed at Los Angeles International Airport. I pointed a finger at the ground, not at the stage, but at the earth beneath us. Marcus is here, Tiffany. He is in this city. He is lying on a stainless steel table at the county coroner's office less than 10 miles from where we are standing. The crowd gasped. The horror of it was palpable. The image of the son lying cold in the morgue while the wife threw a party was too much for some of them. I saw people turning away, covering their mouths. And this morning at 8 a.m. I said, my voice hardening into iron, I stood next to the chief medical examiner. I watched him examine the body you tried so hard to destroy. And do you know what he found? Tiffany shook her head, tears streaming down her face. He found the water in the lungs was fresh, not salt. I lied slightly to confuse her, but then hit her with the truth. But more importantly, he found the neck. I looked at Brett. He was being held by 2 agents near the stairs. He was trembling so hard his knees were knocking together. He found the puncture wound, I said, looking straight at Brett. A tiny red dot just below the hairline behind the right ear. A perfect injection site. And when they ran the tissue analysis surrounding that wound, do you know what they found? I looked back at Tiffany. They did not find ocean water. They found ketamine, a lethal dose, enough to kill a horse, enough to paralyze a man in seconds so he could not swim, so he could not fight, so he would sink to the bottom of the dark ocean while his wife watched from the shore. Tiffany let out a sound that was half sob, half retch. She slumped in the agent's grip, her legs giving out completely. The lie was gone. The technicality was gone. The body was real. The poison was real. And the needle mark was the signature of their crime. It wasn't me, she wailed, her voice barely a whisper now. It was Brett. Brett did it. He said it would be easy. He said no one would look. He promised me. Brett's head snapped up. The betrayal hit him like a physical slap. The woman he had killed for the woman he had dreamed of a future with was throwing him to the wolves in a heartbeat. You liar! Brett shouted, his voice cracking. You handed me the syringe. You told me the dosage. You said if I did not do it, you would leave me. It was your plan, Tiffany. It was all your plan. I did not kill him, Tiffany screamed, kicking her legs. I just watched. Watching is not murder. Watching your husband die and doing nothing is murder, I boomed into the microphone. Plotting to inject him is murder. Faking his cremation is murder. You are not a bystander, Tiffany. You are the architect. Brett looked at the agents holding him. He looked at Tiffany, who was now hysterical on the floor. He looked at the exit sign glowing red in the distance. Panic took over. Logic vanished. He roared a sound of pure animal fear. He threw his elbow back, catching one of the agents in the face. The agent stumbled. Brett ripped his other arm free. He ran. He did not run toward the stage. He ran toward the French doors that led to the garden. He scrambled over the fallen chairs, knocking over guests who screamed and scattered. He was fast. He was strong. He was running for his life. Stop him! Someone shouted, but he did not get far. As he reached the doors, they shattered inward, not from him hitting them, but from the outside. 2 tactical officers in full gear stepped through the broken glass. They did not hesitate. One of them lowered his shoulder and hit Brett with the force of a linebacker. Brett went down hard. He hit the marble floor with a sickening crunch. Before he could take a breath, 3 officers were on top of him. I watched from the stage. It was not a fight. It was a submission. They wrenched his arms behind his back. They zip-tied his wrists. They hauled him up. His nose was bleeding. His tuxedo was ripped. He looked at me across the room and I saw the realization in his eyes. It was over. There were no yachts, there were no millions. There was only concrete and steel waiting for him. I looked back at Tiffany. She had stopped fighting. She was kneeling on the floor of the stage, her head hanging low. She was mumbling to herself. "It is not fair," she whispered. "I was supposed to win. I did everything right." "You did one thing wrong, Tiffany," I said, speaking into the microphone one last time. She looked up at me, her mascara running down her face in black streaks giving her the face of a skull. "What?" she choked out. "You forgot that Marcus was not just a CEO," I said. "He was a son. And you forgot that I am still his father." I stepped back from the microphone. "Take them away, Agent Vance," I said. "Get them out of my house." The agents hauled Tiffany to her feet. She did not scream anymore. She was broken. She walked like a sleepwalker, her feet dragging on the floor. As they led her past the stage, she looked at the shattered champagne glass. She looked at the ice dolphin melting in the corner. She looked at the life she had killed to get and the life she had lost in the trying. The crowd watched in silence. The only sound was the clicking of cameras and the heavy breathing of the guests. I watched them go. I watched until the red dress disappeared through the double doors. I watched until Brett was shoved into the back of a van. The ballroom was quiet now. The flashing lights outside continued their rhythmic pulse, but the chaos inside had settled into shock. I felt a hand on my arm. It was Agent Vance. "We have the evidence, Mr. King," she said softly. "We have the confession on tape thanks to Brett shouting. We have the body. It is a slam dunk. They are never getting out." "Thank you," I said. My voice felt tired. I felt old. The adrenaline was fading and the grief was returning. "You should go home, Mr. King," she said. "You have done enough." I looked around the room. This was my home, but it did not feel like it. It felt like a crime scene. It felt like a museum of bad memories. "I am not staying here," I said. I walked down the stairs of the stage. The crowd parted for me again, but this time they did not look at me with disgust. They looked at me with fear and respect. I walked out the front door, past the melting ice sculptures, past the expensive cars. I walked down the driveway to where my old Ford truck was parked in the shadows. I got in. I sat there for a moment, listening to the silence of the cab. I looked at the passenger seat. It was empty. "We got them, son," I whispered. I started the engine. It roared to life, a familiar, comforting sound. I pulled away from the curb, leaving the lights and the sirens behind. I did not look back. There was nothing back there for me anymore, just ghosts and broken glass. I drove into the night. The city was asleep, but I was wide awake. The nightmare was over. Now the long, hard work of healing could begin. The interrogation room at the federal building smelled of stale coffee and industrial floor cleaner. It was a cold, antiseptic room with gray walls and a single metal table bolted to the floor. I stood on the outside of the one-way glass, watching the woman who used to live in my house. Tiffany was sitting in a metal chair. The red dress was torn and stained with champagne and dirt. Her makeup was smeared across her face like a clown mask that had melted in the rain. She was not crying anymore. She was just staring at the wall, her eyes empty and glazed over. She looked small. She looked like a child who had broken a vase and was waiting for the belt. Agent Vance stood next to me. She held a clipboard. "She has been asking for you," Vance said quietly. She waived her right to an attorney. She said she will not speak to anyone until she speaks to you. "You do not have to go in there, Mr. King. We have enough. The video, the body, the confession from Brett. She is done." "I know," I said, adjusting my jacket. "But I need to finish this. I started this war, Vance. I need to be the one to sign the peace treaty." I walked to the heavy steel door. I took a deep breath. I pushed it open. The sound of the door closing behind me was loud in the small room. Tiffany jumped. She looked up at me. Her eyes were red-rimmed and desperate. When she saw it was me, a flicker of something like hope crossed her face. It was pathetic. She still thought she could manipulate me. She still thought there was a way out. "Gus," she whispered. Her voice was raspy from screaming. "Gus, tell them. Tell them I was coerced. Tell them Brett forced me. You know me, Gus. I am family." I sat down in the chair opposite her. I placed my hands on the table. I looked at her. I did not see a monster. I saw a tragedy. I saw a waste of life. "I am not here to save you, Tiffany. I said, my voice low and steady. I am here to answer the question you asked me in the ballroom. She blinked, confused. What question? You asked me why I laughed, I said. You asked me how I knew. You asked me why I did not cry when you called me that night. Tiffany went still. She leaned forward slightly. The curiosity was stronger than the fear. Yes, she said softly. How did you know? I was so careful. The cremation, the story about the drinking, the timeline. It was perfect. How did you know to call the police so fast? How did you know to stop the burning? I reached into my inside pocket. I did not pull out a weapon. I pulled out a piece of paper. It was folded into a small square. I unfolded it slowly, smoothing the creases on the metal table. You made one mistake, Tiffany, I said. You assumed Marcus was stupid. I pushed the paper toward her. You assumed that because Marcus loved you, he was blind. I continued. You thought that because he was quiet, he was not paying attention. But Marcus was my son, and I taught him that trust is good, but insurance is better. Tiffany looked at the paper. It was a printout of an email. She read the header. From Marcus King to Augustus King. Date Tuesday, 3:00 a.m. She looked up at me. Her face was pale. Tuesday, she whispered. That was the night he died. But this time, 3 a.m. That is 30 minutes before I called you. Exactly, I said. I tapped the paper. Marcus set up a dead man's switch, Tiffany. Do you know what that is? She shook her head slowly. It is an automated system, I explained. Marcus installed it on his private server 6 months ago. It required him to log in every 24 hours and enter a secure code, a code that only he knew. It was a heartbeat check. As long as he entered the code, the system stayed silent. But if he missed a check-in, if he was incapacitated, or kidnapped, or dead, the system was programmed to send this email to me automatically. Tiffany stared at the paper. Her hands were shaking. He missed the check-in on Tuesday night, I said, because he was lying on the floor of a hotel room paralyzed by ketamine. He could not reach his phone. He could not reach his computer. So the system assumed the worst, and it triggered the protocol. I leaned back in my chair. Read it. Tiffany. Read what your husband wrote to me while you were planning his murder. Tiffany looked down at the paper. Her eyes scanned the text. I watched her read the words that condemned her from the grave. Dad. If you are reading this, it means something has happened to me. I hope I am just in a hospital somewhere, but I have a bad feeling. For the last 6 months, I have been tracking the company accounts. Tiffany has been siphoning money. Small amounts at first, but now it is millions. I hired a private investigator. I know about Brett. I know about the apartment they rented in the city. Tiffany gasped. She put her hand over her mouth. I am taking her to Hawaii to give her one last chance to tell the truth. I want to save our marriage, Dad. I want to believe she can change. But if she doesn't, I'm going to file for divorce when we get back. I have all the evidence on an encrypted drive in my safety deposit box. The key is in my fishing tackle box in the garage. If I am gone, do not let her take the company. Do not let her destroy what we built. I love you, Dad. I am sorry I did not listen to you sooner. Love, Marcus. Tiffany dropped the paper. It fluttered to the table like a dead leaf. He knew, she whispered. He knew everything. He knew about the money, I said. He knew about Brett. He knew about the lies. But he still took you to Hawaii. Do you know why? She shook her head, tears streaming down her face again. Because he loved you, I said, my voice cracking slightly. He took you there to forgive you. He wanted to give you a chance to come clean. He was going to offer you a way out. He was going to offer you grace. I leaned forward, getting close to the glass. But you did not want grace, Tiffany. You wanted greed. You killed him too early, I said. If you had waited one more day, if you had let him speak, he would have divorced you, but you would have been free. You would have been alive. But you were so impatient. You were so hungry for the money that you killed the only man who was trying to save you. Tiffany put her head in her hands. She began to sob, deep, racking sobs that shook her whole body. So when my phone rang at 3:30 in the morning, I said, my voice hard as stone, I was not sleeping. I was sitting on the edge of my bed holding this piece of paper. I had just finished reading my son's goodbye letter. I looked at her weeping form. I saw your name on the caller ID. I continued. And I knew he was dead. I knew you had done it. And when I heard your voice, when I heard you lying about the drowning, Lying about the whiskey, lying about the cremation. I paused. I smiled. She looked up at me. Her eyes were full of horror. Why, she choked out. Why did you smile? Because I knew you were already dead, I said. I knew you had walked into a trap you did not see, I said. You thought you were calling a helpless old man, but you were calling a man who had the evidence, the motive, and the timeline sitting right in front of him. You thought you were the hunter Tiffany, but you were just the prey waiting for the cage to close. I stood up. I buttoned my jacket. I picked up the email from the table. I folded it carefully and put it back in my pocket next to my heart. You killed him for nothing, I said, looking down at her. You killed him for a company you could never own and a money you could never spend. And now you are going to spend the rest of your life in a small room just like this one, thinking about that check-in code, thinking about the 30 minutes that cost you your life. Tiffany reached out her hand. Her fingers brushed my sleeve. The handcuffs clinked against the metal table. Gus, she pleaded. I am sorry. Please, I am so sorry. I pulled my arm away. Save your apologies for the judge, Tiffany, I said. Although I doubt he will be as forgiving as Marcus was. I turned and walked to the door. Gus, she screamed, her voice shrill and desperate. Do not leave me here. Please, I am afraid. I stopped at the door. I looked back at her one last time. She looked tiny in that chair, a broken doll in a red dress. You should be afraid, I said. The nights are very long in prison, and you have a lot of ghosts to keep you company. I opened the door and walked out. Agent Vance was waiting for me. She looked at me with respect. She nodded toward the exit. Are you okay, Mr. King? She asked. I took a deep breath. The air in the hallway was cool. It smelled of justice. I am fine, Agent, I said. I walked out of the federal building and into the Los Angeles night. The city was quiet. The stars were hidden behind the smog, but I knew they were there. I walked to my truck. I got in. I sat there for a moment in the silence. I took out the picture of Marcus from my wallet, the one of him winning the gold medal. He was smiling, a real smile, a smile full of life and promise. I touched the photo with my thumb. We did it, son, I whispered. The email arrived. The message was received, and the anchor held. I started the engine. I put the truck in gear. I drove away from the prison, away from the lawyers, away from the money. I drove toward the highway. I was going back to the docks, back to the smell of the ocean and the sound of the seagulls. I was going to buy a small boat. I was going to name it the Marcus. And every morning I was going to go out onto the water and tell my son about the day. I was alone now, but I was not empty. I had the truth. And in a world full of lies, that was enough. I smiled one last time. Not a smile of vengeance, but a smile of peace. And I drove on into the sunrise. The rain felt different today. It was not the angry storm that battered the guest house the night she called me. It was a soft rain. A cleansing rain. It fell gently on the black umbrellas gathered around the open grave, mixing with the scent of wet grass and fresh earth. We buried him on a Tuesday morning under an oak tree that overlooks the Pacific. It was a small service, just me, Lieutenant Kalani, who had flown in from Hawaii, and a few of the old dock workers who remembered when Marcus was just a boy running around in oversized boots. There were no cameras, there were no reporters, and there were certainly no ice sculptures. I stood at the foot of the casket. It was made of simple mahogany, solid, real, just like the boy inside it. I placed my hand on the wood. It was cold, but it did not feel empty. It felt like a final resting place. Rest easy, son, I whispered. The storm is over. I did not say goodbye. Goodbye implies the end. And this was not the end of Marcus King. This was just the end of his pain. The trial had been swift. The federal prosecutors did not play games. They presented the video, they presented the autopsy, they presented the emails. Tiffany did not take the stand. She sat in her orange jumpsuit, staring at the table, her face a blank mask of defeat. Brett took a plea deal to avoid the death penalty, but he still got 40 years. He cried when the judge read the sentence. Tiffany did not cry, she just looked at me. And in her eyes I saw the realization that she had traded her life for a phantom fortune. Life without the possibility of parole. That was the verdict. She would die in a concrete box. She would never see the ocean again. She would never wear red silk again. She would just be inmate number 4920. After the funeral, I drove back to the estate. The gates were open. The for sale sign was already up. I walked through the empty halls of the mansion one last time. The furniture was gone. The paintings were gone. The The silence was heavy, but it was not oppressive anymore. It was just empty space. Real estate agents told me I could get $15 million for the property. I told them to list it for 12 and sell it fast. I wanted the cash, but not for me. I walked into the office where I had found the EpiPen in the trash. The safe was repaired but empty. I sat down in Marcus's chair. I spun around looking at the view of the city he had conquered. I picked up the phone and dialed Goldberg. "Is the paperwork ready?" I asked. "It is ready," Gus Goldberg said. "The Marcus King Justice Foundation is officially registered. The board of directors is seated. We have retired judges. We have social workers. And we have you as the chairman. And the funding I asked." Goldberg paused. "Gus, are you sure about this? You are giving away everything. The house money, the logistics company sale, the insurance payout. It is over $20 million. You could live like a king." "I am a king," I said. "That is my name. But I do not need a castle." I looked at the empty desk. "I want every penny of that money to go to the fund," I said. "I want a 24-hour hotline. I want the best lawyers in the country on retainer. I want private investigators." "Who are we helping?" Gus Goldberg asked, even though he already knew the answer. "We are helping the invisible ones," I said. "We are helping the old men and women who are sitting in guest houses right now, afraid of their own children. We are helping the widows whose signatures are being forged. We are helping the fathers who are being told they are burdens." I took a deep breath. I want them to know that when they pick up the phone, they are not alone. I want them to know that there is an army waiting to fight for them. And I want the greedy children of the world to know that if they come for their parents, they are coming for me. "We will make it happen," Gus Goldberg said. "It will be a legacy that lasts forever." I hung up. I walked out of the office. I walked out of the front door. I locked it behind me. I tossed the keys into the mailbox. I walked down the long driveway. My old Ford truck was parked at the curb. It was rusted. The paint was peeling. The engine needed a tune-up. But it was mine. It was paid for with my sweat. And it had never lied to me. I climbed into the cab. The leather seat was cracked and comfortable. I put the key in the ignition. The engine roared to life, a familiar rumble that felt like a heartbeat. I looked in the rearview mirror. The mansion stood on the hill, a monument to ambition and tragedy. It was a beautiful house, but it was just a house. It was not a home. Home is where you are safe. Home is where you are respected. I put the truck in gear. I was 72 years old. I had lost my wife. I had lost my son. Most people would say I had lost everything. But as I drove down the winding road toward the highway, I did not feel empty. I felt full. I had my dignity. I had my name. And I had a mission. There were other Tiffanys out there. There were other Bretts. And there were thousands of Marcuses who needed a warning. I was not retiring. I was just getting started. I merged onto the highway heading east, heading back toward the rising sun, back toward the simple life. I turned on the radio. Some old blues song was playing. I hummed along. "Rest in peace. Son," I said to the wind rushing through the open window. "Dad is on the job." And for the first time in a long time, the road ahead looked clear. Greed is a powerful drug, but it has a fatal side effect. It makes you blind to the details. Tiffany thought she was playing chess with a lonely old man, forgetting that he was the one who built the board she was standing on. She underestimated the silent strength of a father's love and the patient fury of a man who has nothing left to lose. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it simply smiles in the dark, waits for the right moment, and signs the check that your karma can't cash. Never mistake silence for weakness. And what would you have done if you were in my shoes? Would you have taken the $6 million and walked away? Or would you have fought until the bitter end like I did? Let me know in the comments below. I read every single one of them. If you enjoyed this story, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It helps us share these stories with more people who might need to hear them. Remember, you are never too old to fight for what is right. See you in the next story.